Audiobook by Fate's Reader. Don't forget to subscribe and like the channel for more epic series. Drop your recommended novel below. We love to know what you want to hear next. Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 501, Beating Up Grand Master. The past human emperors nodded, sharing the same feeling. Even though every human emperor looked like they deserved a beating in the eyes of their masters, it was the first time they had met such a human emperor that deserved to be beaten by all of them. The past human emperors were all top-notch practitioners of their generations. It wasn't status that had commanded respect from other sects, but their abilities which were strong enough, sweeping away everyone in their age and rarely finding a worthy match. Any human emperor which hadn't fought a few rounds with the gods of high heavens would be too embarrassed to meet their ancestors after dying. Yet how many people were like this in a generation? Yet Qin Mu, against overbearing strong practitioners like them, actually said he was afraid of injuring them. He even said that their techniques and divine arts had already fallen behind times, so how could they endure? Third ancestor came closer while saying indifferently, "All the past human emperors are very haughty, and every one of them is overflowing with haughtiness after death, wanting to beat this and that. However, you are still the first one to say we are behind times. Human Emperor Qin, how remarkable. Disciple beating master is also common. For example, me, I have beaten the old geezer before. However, to beat all the old geezers, Human Emperor Qin's voice is not small. I would like to see if you actually have this ability." Fourth ancestor said indifferently. Third ancestor gave him a dark look. Second ancestor's expression was imposing as he said, "Human Emperor Qin is a living person, so how we fight is also another problem. However, first ancestor has a treasure that should still be around here. It's called Between Life and Death, and it can situate us between life and death, which would be the most suitable to exchange blows." The past human emperors all frowned. First ancestor is not here, so who can use Between Life and Death? Second ancestor smiled and said, "As the disciple of first ancestor, I'm the owner of Sacred Hall of Five Yang when he's not around, so I can naturally use it. Be quiet. I'm very familiar with this place, even more familiar than with my own home. Wait for me. Let me fetch Between Life and Death." Everyone was slightly curious. They had heard of Between Life and Death but never seen this treasure before. They had heard that it was because first ancestor missed his wife that he crafted it to create a passage to Yudu so he could meet her there. However, his treasure didn't have much use or power, so people that crafted these kinds of items were few in numbers. Yet using Between Life and Death for living people and dead people to fight couldn't be any more clever. Not much later, second ancestor came back, and everyone saw that his hands were empty. They couldn't help being bewildered and asked suspiciously, "Second ancestor, where is Between Life and Death?" "This is Between Life and Death." Second ancestor's sleeves trembled, and a long river flew out from his sleeves. The huge river flew out of Sacred Hall of Five Yang, becoming wider and wider. It stretched across several hundred miles and floated in the sky above Fengdu City. Everyone hurriedly walked out of Sacred Hall of Five Yang, where they saw a long river floating in the sky. It even had a flying bridge hanging above it. In the river, there was also a decorated pleasure boat that was berthed under the bridge. Everyone cheered and exclaimed, "To meet with wife." First ancestor actually exhausted immense magic power to craft this treasure. Go! Let's go up to the bridge." Qin Mu also followed them up. The moment they stepped on the bridge, something strange suddenly happened. He actually saw flesh and blood growing on his body. Upon coming to the living realm of the dead were revived and the living were changed into skeletons. Yet the river and the bridge could actually allow him to recover his flesh and blood. It was truly strange. The past human emperors stood on the bridge, but they didn't shed their flesh and blood too. They still had complete corporeal bodies. From that, it was evident that this was the marvelous ability of Between Life and Death. When I controlled Moonship to become Moon Guardian, I had to withstand the suppression of the living realm of the dead while keeping a body of flesh and blood. Looks like first ancestor's abilities are definitely much stronger than those of Moon Guardian. Qin Mu exclaimed in admiration in his head. First ancestor human emperor's abilities were profound mysteries. He was no doubt an outstanding talent of founding emperor era. However, this between life and death isn't useless. Instead, it's an effective implement. He blinked, and his heart pounded. He immediately thought of the greatest use of between life and death, which allowed Fengdu to interfere with the world of the living, to interfere with reality. Between life and death could interfere with the world of the living and allow the gods of Fengdu to descend on the world of the living. Even though the surface of the river wasn't huge, it was still extraordinary. Thinking about it, the gods and devils of Fengdu were in tens of thousands. If they descended on the mortal world, who could be a match for them? If between life and death was used properly, it's an immensely powerful weapon. Qin Mu stood on the head of the bridge and looked at the river flowing toward Yudu. He could faintly see its darkness on the other side. The river was extremely wonderful, and it was obvious that it wasn't ordinary in any way. In Fengdu City, countless gods and devils raised their heads to look at the huge river floating in the sky. It was gently floating and looked extremely elegant. Those human emperors again. A god lowered his head to look away. He then spoke to everyone in the surroundings. Ever since these fellows came to Fengdu, more and more of them showed up, and they're becoming more and more arrogant. They are a force of our Fengdu, but I'm afraid only those devils could be a match for them. No need to look, disperse, let them forget themselves in their fight. First ancestor met his wife by sending this pleasure boat into Yudu to guide the souls of his wife out. They would then meet on the bridge. On the bridge between life and death, second ancestor's face dimmed. After the incident of their meetings being discovered by Yudu, the soul of Master's wife was taken away by the messengers of death. First ancestor actually didn't know about this and still stood on the bridge to wait for her, but he didn't see nor hear her for dozens of years. At that time, I had stood beside the river and seen him growing older day by day. Let's not talk about this. He roused his spirit and looked at Qin Mu. He chuckled and said with a smile, "There's still an overlord body here that says we are all behind times. It's time to let a younger generation know the immensity of heaven and earth." Qin Mu was endlessly astonished. "Grandmaster, ancestors, you guys also know I'm an overlord body?" On the bridge, the past human emperor all revealed strange smiles and said in unison, "How could we not know? Little brat Su has told us all about it. We know everything." Qin Mu looked at their strange smiles and was bewildered. Do people all become so weird after they die? Human Emperor Qikong smiled with exultation and chuckled. Little brat Su said he found an overlord body for a disciple who is very powerful, matchless in this world. When we heard about it, we all said that you will definitely beat him to death after you die and make him die a second time. Qin Mu was puzzled. Why would I beat village chief to death? Other human emperors were afraid Qikong would let the cat out of the bag and coughed repeatedly. Human Emperor Qikong understood and smiled. Overlord Body Qin, you said we are old, useless, outdated, behind times, can't fight. So now it's time for us to demand justice. Grandmaster, I had only said your techniques and divine arts were outdated, but I didn't say the rest. Qin Mu immediately said. Tut! Human Emperor Qikong gave a shout and leaped down from the bridge. He stepped on the river surface and raised his head to laugh. Enough with the nonsense. Let's fight. His aura burst forth, and 7 explosions sounded out one after another. 7 divine treasures instantly opened one after another. His primordial spirit was incomparably powerful and stood upright on the divine bridge. Stars whooshed and gathered and transformed into a Milky Way to swirl around him. Below the divine bridge was the dark Yudu, and between the heaven and earth were the sun and the moon, 5 elements. They combined together to become 7 stars, each with a god standing upright on them. Below 7 stars was the land formed by the spirit platform, and the 6 directions was already established. Human Emperor Qikong was incomparably overbearing, and he raised his hand to seal his divine bridge divine treasure, which then vanished gradually. He then sealed his life and death divine treasure, and Yudu vanished. He then sealed his celestial being realm, and his primordial spirit vanished. His aura weakened, but the haughtiness remained just as wild. As he stood on the river surface, visions of black volcanoes erupting actually formed behind him. Human Emperor Qi stretched out his right hand and formed a tight fist. He beckoned Qin Mu with his index finger. "Overlord Body Qin, come over eh." Qin Mu's heart started to pound as though he was delighted at seeing a prey. He couldn't suppress his excitement, but he still hesitated. "Second ancestor, third ancestor, our human emperor bloodline doesn't have any 3 knives and 6 holes punishment for beating up our grand masters and ancestors, right?" The past human emperors smiled. "We aren't a devil cult like Heavenly Devil Cult, so why would we have 3 knives and 6 holes punishment? Just go." Qin Mu relaxed and took a step. Landing on the river surface, he said solemnly, "Grandmaster, if I offend you, just fight if you want to fight." Human Emperor Qi shouted out and stepped forward with a punch. The visions of the volcanoes behind him instantly became extremely violent as they suddenly erupted. Flames blazed, and black smoke and ashes rushed into the sky. They filled the sky as the river started to boil. The vibration from his fist power and fist will actually cause the river water around Qin Mu to rise up. It separated it into droplets strung in a line, gently vibrating up while flowing into the sky. Human Emperor Qi rushed into the river water that was flowing up with his fist becoming bigger and bigger, becoming more and more overbearing. His aura became even more violent. Formation markings swirled in Qin Mu's eye, and the Milky Way in his eyes wrapped around the sun. He could clearly see Human Emperor Qi face colliding with the droplets of water and the process of the droplets exploding on his face and splattering out. Blind's 9 heavens eyes awakening skill. Boom! Violent vibrations came from the river surface, and Qin Mu's fist collided with Human Emperor Qi fist. Their clothes fluttered backward. The magma and flames from the volcanoes by Human Emperor Qi looked like they were suddenly snapped as they soared into the sky. They were sent straight back by a hurricane. Human Emperor Qi expression changed drastically, and he felt an unbearable feeling in his chest. Such sick, vital Qi cultivation. The river water that was flying in the air suddenly paused, and Qin Mu's fist changed into palm with his vital Qi going berserk. 8,000 swords. The droplets of river water in the sky were pulled over and transformed into fine swords. 8,000 swords executed the 17 sword forms, changing unpredictably to attack Human Emperor Qi together. Human Emperor Qi expression changed, and he rose into the air to retreat. His body fell back freely as though he was a swan goose flying on the river surface. He went up and down thrice, his body movements extremely strange. He avoided the transformations and attacks of the 8,000 swords time and time again. Qin Mu took a step forward, his speed unimaginably fast. He raised his hands, and countless water droplets landed in them to form a long sword which slashed down. Swoosh! Countless sword lights burst forth from his sword, and the swords that were like a storm drowned out their target. Human Emperor Qi gave a shout and rose into the sky. He waved his hand, and apparitions of palms filled the sky. Suddenly, the sound of swords breaking through the air rang out as the swords formed by Qin Mu swirled and sliced open his palms. Instantly, the 2 palms were like sieves. Ha! Qin Mu's huge foot stepped heavily on the river surface, and a stream of river water soared into the sky like a water dragon. Qin Mu stretched his hands for a grab and used the water dragon as a spear, moving along with it. Countless traces of a spear stabbed Human Emperor Qi who was in midair. He was hung on the spear before being swung up by Qin Mu to be smashed ruthlessly onto the river surface. It exploded. The water dragon spear in Qin Mu's hand dispersed, and he raised his hands high up toward the sky. Thunder and lightning crisscrossed to transform into a lightning dragon, which struck where Human Emperor Qin had fallen. Great overarching heavenly stars palm force. Qin Mu raised his hand to throw a mudra out, and behind him stars filled the sky, forming the terrifying great overarching divine art force field. The apparition of 360 gods appeared in the force field, all of them striking with their palms. The strike had no sound. The huge river trembled violently and warped in the air. This came from the 360 different palm forces erupting at the same time, forming a distorted force field. Qin Mu pulled back his hand, and after a moment, human Emperor Qi Kong rose from underwater and floated down the river, passing by the long bridge of life and death. On the bridge, the past human emperors stretched their heads out to look, then turned to each other in dismay. After a moment, fourth ancestor said softly, "About Overlord body, was little Su lying to us? Could this world really have an Overlord body?" Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 502, Beating Up Ancestors. On the bridge, the past human emperors had weird expressions. Village chief had told them that he had made up Overlord body, which was a white lie used to motivate Qin Mu, this mortal body, to work hard. And they had believed him. Yet at the same realm, human Emperor Qi Kong was actually at a disadvantage from the first move. Afterward, he was beaten up to a point that no mortal body should be able to do with just hard work. How could it be possible for a mortal body to rely only on hard work to beat a human emperor to such a point? Because of that, even the past human emperors couldn't help doubting if Overlord body truly didn't exist in the world. On the bridge, human Emperor Yi Shan's vital qi transformed into a huge hand and poked human Emperor Qi Kan, who was floating downstream, with a snow-white finger that looked like jade. Human Emperor Qi Kong lay with his arms spread out and stared at the sky with wide eyes. He was motionless, and after being poked, he sank into the water before floating back up. "Good disciple, have you accepted having been beaten by your grand disciple?" Human Emperor Ishan asked while holding back a laugh. "Damned old man, don't poke me. Let me have some peace," Human Emperor Qi Kong said unpleasantly. "I'm just weirded out by the beating. Not that I've accepted it. I just want some time to think about how I've lost." Human Emperor Ishan burst into laughter and rejoiced in his misfortune. "Still saying that you haven't accepted your defeat?" Human Emperor Qi Kong flipped over and lay on the water with his butt facing upward, letting the current bring him far away. Qin Mu couldn't help worrying and shouted, "Grandmaster, don't choke on the water." Human Emperor Ishan laughed. "This brat is always like this when he loses. Ignore him. He's wiping his tears and don't want you to see it." Qin Mu felt uneasy in his heart. He had beaten his grandmaster until he was wiping tears in the river. This kind of thing was somewhat disgraceful. As a youth taught by disabled elderly village, he usually respected the elders, but of course cripple and mute didn't suffer a lack of beatings from him when fighting on the same realm. "I may have been too heavy with my blows. Grandmaster, my fist skills are actually inferior to yours, and I just relied on denser cultivation to overwhelm you, so don't be sad." Qin Mu jumped on the head of the bridge and leaned on the railing. He stretched himself over and shouted to Qi Kong, who was floating away. "I didn't mean to be so heavy with my blows. I saw Grandmaster's abilities being abnormally strong, so my competitive spirit couldn't help arising, and I used my full power straight away. I rarely do that when meeting experts of the same realm nowadays." He was slightly desolate and looked sorrowful. "After all, I'm the Overlord body. I thought I could encounter experts on the same realm who could be a match for me, but who knew that Grandmaster's abilities were a little poor. But this isn't your fault." On the bridge, the human emperors held back their anger while watching the young human emperor showing a longing in his eyes as he looked at Qi Kong, who was floating down the river. "If only ancestors and grandmasters could be part of the same generation as me, it would have been great. If we were born in the same generation, you guys could improve with me and be a match for me. It's a pity you guys lived so long ago and can't catch up to the generation of Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor and me when we're doing the reform. As a result, your divine arts, paths, and skills are behind times." The fists of the ancestors cracked, and they held themselves back fiercely from blowing up. Human Emperor Lan Pa hid her smile while gritting her teeth. The sound was horrifying. Even though the brat's words were very humble, every sentence could anger living people to death and dead people to life. This made the past human emperors want to just press him down against the ground and beat him up. "Overlord Bodychin, you have only defeated that brat Qi Kong and are already saying that our paths, skills, and divine arts are behind times. Isn't it a little too boastful?" Human Emperor Ishan's tone was stiff even if he spoke with a pleasant expression. Come. Let me teach you what divine arts are like." Qin Mu revealed a troubled expression when he turned around to look at this great grandmaster that was only 5 feet tall. Ancestor, the path you took was the path of the divine arts, and they are indeed very strong. However, by being so close to me, you've already died 1, 2, 3, for 16, 17 times. Human Emperor Yishan couldn't restrain his anger and raised a ball of lightning in his hands while holding back his urge to smack the brat to death.
When so close, the experts of Celestial Being Realm wouldn't be able to even take a move from me. Qin Mu seemed to have no emotion as he continued to talk by himself. What Ancestor cultivates is divine arts. However, cultivating divine arts means you are lacking in regard to the corporeal body. Since we are so close, just the time of a sentence the Ancestors speak is enough for me to kill you 20-30 times. Human Emperor Yishan almost puked blood, and his face went black. He jumped off a bridge, and a cloud caught his stout figure up as he said angrily, "Rascal's tone is pretty arrogant. Let me pull our distance first before fighting then." The cloud below him feet lifted him up and went upstream urgently. After 5 or 6 miles, Human Emperor Yishan felt that the distance was about right. However, he suddenly remembered how fast Qin Mu's sword skill was and felt that the distance wasn't too safe either, so he got 3 more miles back. When he remembered how fast Qin Mu's speed was and how easy he had caught up to Qi Kong earlier, he distanced himself by another 2 miles. I can't move back anymore, or they will think that I'm scared of losing to my great-grand disciple. Human Emperor Yishan looked back, and since the distance was too far, the bridge had already become a fine line and Qin Mu was a dot on the fine line. Human Emperor Yishan blushed. Running so far in a short while was indeed a cowardly act. Come down, eh? Human Emperor Yishan had a steady heartbeat and his voice was vigorous. He looked exactly like Human Emperor Qi Kong. On the bridge, Second Ancestor shouted, "Yishan, you've forgotten to seal your divine treasures." Human Emperor Yishan's face turned red again. He was too nervous and as a result, had forgotten to seal his divine treasures. He immediately sealed his 3 great divine treasures and shouted again in high spirits, "Come down, eh?" Thump. Qin Mu jumped onto the river. Connecting walls tapping blue mountains. Human Emperor Yishan made the first move, and in his wide sleeves, his 5 stubby fingers were moving up and down. Instantly, over 10 miles of river beneath his feet exploded, and water formed into blue mountains. The ridges and peaks piled up into a range while rumbling. The huge river transforming into blue mountains might look beautiful, but this was a divine art that secretly contained a killing intent. Yishan's divine arts had entered the path, but different from other people's divine arts, his wouldn't explode with power if they weren't activated. Only if one was inside his divine art, a slight movement could activate an overwhelming disaster. The blue mountains that were rising fiercely instantly came to Qin Mu's side, and he couldn't help becoming excited. He was so excited that every speck of his vital qi was trembling, even more active than usual. This is the source of Village Chief's first move. Village Chief's sword treading mountains and rivers is from this move of Human Emperor Yishan. From divine art to sword skill, Village Chief is indeed a genius. Qin Mu was beyond excited and couldn't help howling. True Dragon Overlord Body. Too excited. He had suffered numerous times under Village Chief's sword treading mountains and rivers back when he had learned this move for the first time. At the time, he had been defeated repeatedly under Village Chief's hands. Now that his horizons and knowledge were no longer like before, meeting the origin of sword treading mountains and rivers made him feel like he was competing with Village Chief once again. He was so excited that he couldn't help executing True Dragon Overlord Body. His vital qi grew boundless, and every strand of it that leaked out of his body presented a different dragon form. True Dragon Overlord Body was the strong corporeal body divine art that he had comprehended by combining the cultivation method of the dragon race from the True Dragon's Nest with Overlord Body 3 elixir technique. His vital qi changed into dragon vitality which shook the surrounding space, forming all kinds of strange dragon markings. They looked like runes and talismans as they lighted up continuously on his body. He was using corporeal body divine art to fight against a spell divine art. Qin Mu rushed straight ahead. He stepped on the mountains while sprinting straight for Human Emperor Yishan, who was over 10 miles away. boom, boom, boom. His fists and legs moved swiftly. Hundreds of true dragons danced around him and roared powerfully, smashing the mountains and rivers to smithereens. He let the divine art of human Emperor Xian bombard him, but it could not break through the defense of his true dragon overlord body. Human Emperor Xian's expression changed drastically. The fellow was actually so powerful that he could use his corporeal body to break through the divine art. Xian then immediately changed his divine art and attacked frantically while thinking to himself, "Let me see how you break this. You are in for a beating if you come here." Mountains crumbled and transformed into rising waves. On the bridge, the past human emperors felt the raging fighting spirit from Qin Mu's corporeal body assaulting their faces with gales and fluttering their clothes. This kind of corporeal body divine art is even stronger than that of second ancestor, third ancestor said solemnly. Tuayu, you're skilled in formation calculation and your attainments in algebra are unmatched in this world, so can you calculate where his flaw is? In human Emperor Tuayu's eyes, countless formations lighted up and dimmed as he frantically calculated the arrangements of all kinds of dragon markings around Qin Mu's moving body. Based on them, he calculated the transformations of the dragon markings on his skin. From there, he calculated the vital qi circulation in his body, the movement of his muscles, and the operating method of his power. He then calculated the operating path of Qin Mu's technique and the circulation path of his vital qi in his divine treasures. The amount of calculation required was too much, and they were all complicated, but human Emperor Tuayu was unruffled and had plenty of strength left. He was the strongest formation expert of his era, and his attainments in algebra even won over the Tao master of that time. As he debated with Tao sect, none of them was unconvinced. By then, the past human emperors had already seen how powerful Qin Mu was and speculated that they would only be in for a beating on the same realm. Being defeated was a small matter, but it was a huge matter when considering the humiliation of it. That was why they had no choice but to ask human Emperor Tuayu to first calculate Qin Mu's flaw so they could get a chance at a victory. This was an act of helplessness. He has a flaw. Human Emperor Tuayu's eyes lighted up. Meanwhile below, Qin Mu was like a hot knife going through butter as he sprinted straight for human Emperor Xian. Human Emperor Tuayu said solemnly, his flaw is at his human center. Wait a minute, it has shifted, it's now at the left shoulder, no, it's at the back now. Where is it exactly? Human Emperor Lanpa asked angrily. Great Grandmaster, can you do it or not? Human Emperor Tuayu was about to speak when human Emperor Xian below executed his strongest divine art, which was God's sealing finger. It attracted everyone's gaze. God's sealing finger sealed the vital qi and primordial spirit by attacking the soul. This was the divine art that human Emperor Xian used to fight against the gods of high heavens and even succeeded time and time again. When he tapped with his finger, waves weren't raised and wind didn't blow. Qin Mu had already come before him, and the two of them were only a mile away. However, that strike reached the heart of Qin Mu's brows instantly, giving him no time to react. Nice. Everyone on the bridge praised in unison. A finger from God. Let's see how arrogant can little overlord body still be. At that moment, the heart of Qin Mu's brow split apart, and a tiny spirit embryo appeared. It merged with his soul and transformed into a primordial spirit. Layers of formation swirled frantically in its eyes as the Milky Way coiled around and the sun erupted. Two rays of light shot out while humming. One of them broke through the god-sealing finger by human Emperor Xian as easily as smashing rotten wood. Such a powerful primordial spirit made everyone on the bridge stare down with their eyes wide open. They saw the other ray of light shoot toward human Emperor Xian's chest and broke through his body protection divine art, causing a flaw to appear. Sword treading mountains and rivers. The vital qi around Qin Mu's body that was raging like dragons suddenly transformed into countless flying swords that drowned out human Emperor Xian. The imposing mountains and rivers made up of 10,000 swords rumbled loudly as human Emperor Xian was stabbed all over before falling headfirst into the river. Sword of Founding Emperor Sea of Blood. Suddenly, the 10,000 swords merged, and the long river instantly seemed as though it was dyed with blood. Countless heads of gods and devils floated up, creating a terrifying scene of bloodshed. Qin Mu shifted sideways and slashed down with his sword. Human Emperor Ishan rose from the sea of blood and floated downstream. After a moment, the vision vanished, and the river water became clear again. Qin Mu looked at the bitter face of Human Emperor Ishan, who floated away. The white-haired and plump elder stared at him with a look of dying with a grievance. Qin Mu scratched his head and started, "Ancestor Ishan." Human Emperor Ishan made a splash as he flipped over to face down while his butt faced the sky and floated away silently.
Found it! Human Emperor Tuoyu's eyes lit up, and he said in delight. His flaw lies in his dantian, the third one counting from the end of his backbone. That's the source of his flaw. I'll go beat this rascal to death. Lan Po was full of zest as she carried her basket while jumping down the bridge. She sprinted straight for Qin Mu with a smile. Little Qin, let Granny fight in spirit weapons with you. Human Emperor Tuoyu hesitated for a moment, feeling that he might have missed something. Suddenly, he slapped his head and cried out, I'm wrong. He only has 3 divine treasures and not 4. He had merged 6 directions divine treasure and 7 stars divine treasures into 1. I calculated according to the circulation path of 4 divine treasures, so the flaw calculated is thousands of miles away from the true flaw. Say no more. The raging river calmed down, and under the bridge, Human Emperor Lan Po floated by with all kinds of spirit weapons from her basket scattered around. Bitterness was written on her face as she gritted her teeth while saying, Say no more, Great Grandmaster. The moment I made my move, I knew you had calculated wrongly. Human Emperor Tuoyu's face turned red, and he looked to the other human emperors on the bridge. I will not calculate wrongly now. What are these expressions? I really won't calculate wrongly now. Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 503 Legend of Overlord Body. The other human emperors had weird expressions, and they were all silent. Tuoyu was always the most reliable one among them, and his attainments in algebra were known to be unmatched in the world. Yet against Overlord Body Qin, mistakes actually showed up even with his algebra attainments. When facing an overlord body like Qin Mu, any mistake could result in total humiliation. For precaution, they would rather not trust Human Emperor Tuoyu's calculations. Human Emperor Tuoyu was angered and jumped down the bridge. You guys don't trust me? Can I still be wrong? I'll go down and cripple this brat for all of you to see. Great overarching heavenly stars palm force. On the bridge, second ancestor said calmly, Look, I said his calculations were wrong, right? Now he's floating. If we believed him, the ones floating now would be us. Third ancestor and the other past emperors had the same sentiments. Human Emperor Qing Ning popped his head out and rejoiced at the other's misfortune. Master, where did you calculate wrong now? Human Emperor Tuoyu had nothing left to live for and said with a stupefied expression, Primordial spirit. I calculated his primordial spirit wrongly. It's stronger than I reckoned, but I feel that I've seen through him now. He leaped out from the water and landed on the bridge all drenched. He had a smile of exultation. I definitely won't calculate wrongly this time, so I can definitely tell you where his flaw is. Just believe me this once. The past human emperors yawned while Human Emperor Qin Ning's gaze flickered. Since Master has already seen through his flaw, Master can go down again and defeat that rascal. We will cheer for Master. Human Emperor Tuoyu took out his abacus spirit weapon and slapped his disciple's head with it. As a disciple, not only are you not supporting your master, you're even rejoicing in my misfortune. What have I taught you? I taught you the path of calculation, yet you learned some temperament. Go down and beat him up for me. Qing Ning turned his head to look at Human Emperor Kongxian, who was overjoyed, and kicked him down the bridge. I taught you temperament, yet you cultivated some spells with words? Go down and beat him up for me. Human Emperor Kongxian saw Qin Mu rushing over and immediately waved his hands while shaking his head. Human Emperor Qin is indeed an overlord body, so there's no need to fight. Qin Mu immediately stopped and smiled. I'm also not someone who likes fighting. I just feel that the paths, skills, and divine arts of ancestors and grandmasters can still be improved, even if they're already powerful. If you could continue to develop their power, you would definitely surpass your past selves. Especially Ancestor Kong Xian's spells with words are extremely extraordinary. It's the most marvelous divine art I have ever seen. Human Emperor Kong Xian was delighted and couldn't contain his joy. You also think my divine art is extraordinary? Qin Mu nodded, and his two hands moved as he walked on the river. He made the sealing pose and said, "When I saw Ancestor attacking Ancestor Qing Ning, you used this move to directly seal Ancestor Qing Ning. I wonder what divine art was that." This is Secrets of Seal Word. Human Emperor Kong Xian couldn't conceal his excitement when talking about his divine art. He taught Qin Mu personally how to execute vital qi for Secrets of Seal Word and how he should speak. The crux of spells with words lies in Soundwave Divine Arts and Talisman Divine Arts, merging body movements, footwork, and technique into one, then adding arrays of vital qi runes. Only then can you execute it. Look! He used his vital qi, and his foot moved 2 circles while his hands crossed each other. With his vital qi bursting forth, he shouted, "Seal!" With that shout, his vital qi formed a huge seal word under his feet like ink, and Qin Mu's eyes instantly turned black. He couldn't hear any sounds. All his 5 senses were completely blocked off. He couldn't even sense his own vital qi. The next instant, the feeling of his 5 senses having been sealed vanished. Great divine art! Qin Mu was beyond excited and consulted Human Emperor Kong Xian again. Then, after a moment, he tried it for himself, executing Secrets of Seal Word. Seal! A huge seal word instantly appeared on the river under his feet. Human Emperor Kong Xian was stunned. He has managed to learn it so fast? He learned the ultimate art of my life on the first try? Could this world really have an overlord body? It isn't just a story that little Su made up. He was still slightly uncertain. After village chief had entered Fengdu, he had treated lying to Qin Mu about the overlord body as the greatest achievement in his lifetime. He was very proud of it and didn't hide it from any past human emperors. It could be said that all the human emperor, with the exception of Qin Mu, knew that overlord body was fake. Only the youth was kept in the dark. Yet now, human emperor felt that Qin Mu could really be an overlord body. "Let me teach you Secrets of Strength Word." Human Emperor Kong Xian's gaze flickered, and he imparted Secrets of Strength Word to Qin Mu. The youth mastered it in a short time once again, and when he executed it, the strength word formed by runes appeared behind him. With the accompaniment of the temperament of the strength word, the power of the runes was activated, and the strength of his corporeal body was multiplied. Human Emperor Kong Xian was ineffably astonished. It was impossible to master spells with words in such a short time. When he had created the divine art, he was already middle-aged. He had cultivated along with Human Emperor Qing Ning and had astonishing attainments in temperament, but wanting to break free, he had started to study hard and achieved extremely high attainments in calligraphy, runes, formations, body movements, footwork, and fist skills as well. He had used dozens of years of his life to merge everything he had learned, and only then did he manage to create his ultimate art of spells with words, taking over as the Human Emperor and managing the Human Emperor's seal. All the sects in the martial world had been somewhat respectful of him. For Qin Mu to master his spells with words in just a short while, didn't this mean that he also had extremely high attainments in calligraphy, runes, formations, body movements, footwork, and fist skills? Even if he had extremely high attainments in all these fields, to master the ultimate art that he had spent dozens of years to merge in such a short time was just too astonishing. Qin Mu then learned Secrets of Fix Word, which came out from the palm. The Fix Word appeared in front of him, and it was mastered by him as easily as all the others. Human Emperor Kong Xian grew more and more astonished. Suddenly, Third Ancestor spoke up. "Little Qin, come learn this move from me." Human Emperor Kong Xian was awakened from his astonishment and looked around. Only then did he realize that the numerous human emperors had come down from the bridge some time ago and gathered around them. Even Lan Pe Yishan, Qi Kong, and the rest who had floated down were also present. They were all staring at Qin Mu with strange gazes. Human Emperor Kong Xian was puzzled and moved to the side. Third Ancestor raised his palm and said solemnly, This move of mine is called Yin Yang Heaven Flipping Hands. The palm is Yin and the back of the hand is Yang. Left and right can supplement each other, or you can also do dual Yin or Yang, flipping the heaven with Yin and Yang. He explained the circulation path of his technique, and with a turn of his hand, pure Yang rushed out like thunder, giving off a series of explosions on the river that rang 100 times. Throughout 10 miles, the palm force of the pure Yang exploded, and waves were raised dozens of yards high. The palm of third ancestor flipped, and before the river water could land down, it instantly solidified and transformed into resplendent ice sculptures. "Try it," third ancestor said to Qin Mu while taking a step back. Qin Mu pondered over it before suddenly taking a step forward. When he turned his hand around as Yang, a series of explosions rang out on the river, spreading throughout the 10 miles. Next, when he flipped his hand as Yin and the palm force shot out, the river water froze in midair. Third ancestor raised his eyebrows but didn't say anything. "Brat Qin, learn this move from me." Fifth ancestor went up to him and said, "This move of Mai is called 5 Thunder Heaven Raising Bell, and it's the combination of thunder skill and fist skill." He punched out then. Instantly, a bell rang, and lightning coiled around his body, forming a huge transparent bell that rang in the air. Fifth ancestor moved skillfully, his fists and legs direct and efficient. His attack was simple yet effective. Any punch and any kick could make the bell vibrate, and the 5 Thunder Heaven Raising Bell around him grew big at times and became small at others. It shook continuously, the power bursting forth from sometimes in a hum and sometimes in a haw. It had a certain kind of artistic mood and charm. He imparted his 5 Thunder Heavenly Raising Bell to Qin Mu, who was full of anticipation. The youth muttered to himself irresolutely for a moment before suddenly raising his hands high up. Lightning covered him from above, and every punch and kick from him had great strength and were incomparably heavy. The ringing of a bell reverberated endlessly as 5 Thunder Heaven Raising Bell shook without end. The power flowed through his fists and legs to strike out in all directions. Exactly the same. Fifth ancestor narrowed his eyes and let out a shaky breath. "Come, learn a move from me." Human Emperor Yi Shan went forward and said, "My divine art is compatible with my technique. A different circulation path of vital qi can transform divine arts, so that when they will burst forth, there will be astonishing power. This move of mine is called Celestial Cave and Milky Way hanging from Jade Heaven." Without noticing it, Qin Mu had learned a move or two from the divine arts of all 34 human emperors. He would master all of them in a short time and execute them like the real deal. In the same realm, the power was also not inferior at all. Second ancestor had a grim expression. He looked at third ancestor, fourth ancestor, and they all nodded silently. "Human Emperor Qin, go take a walk around the city," second ancestor said with a smile. "I've heard from Little Su that you are also the cult master of Heavenly Devil Cult. It's rare that you can come, so why don't you meet the past cult masters of Heavenly Devil Cult as well?" Qin Mu was delighted. "I was planning to." Second ancestor put away between life and death. The huge river, long bridge, and pleasure boat swooshed as they flowed back into his sleeve, and Qin Mu immediately turned back from a body of flesh and blood back to a skeleton wearing clothes. He inquired about the location where the past cult master of Heavenly Devil Cult stayed and begged his pardon from all of the human emperors. Only then did he return to the city and walk away. Second ancestor and the rest of the past human emperors returned to Sacred Hall of 5 Yang and looked at one another in dismay before lowering their gazes. "Is there such a mortal body? I can't believe it." Human Emperor Qi Kong let out a shaky breath and shook his head. "I won't believe even if you beat me to death. I also don't believe." Human Emperor Lan Per revealed a look of disbelief and said, "We're all stubborn like a donkey and unwilling to learn from our masters, wanting to walk our own path no matter what. As a result, our Hall of Human Emperors never had an ultimate art that was properly passed down since everyone wanted to create their own. Different techniques, different divine arts, so if anyone wanted to learn our techniques and divine arts, it would be really strange. But he managed to learn all of them, and in little time. In the short while we spent on the river, He learned everything that we taught him and could use it freely as though he had put in 100 years of hard work. Second ancestor sighed and said, I suspect he is truly an overlord body. Little Su might be right by accident. This child that he underestimated since he was young is truly the one and only overlord body. Everyone was suspicious, and human Emperor Qikong said, Do you think that brat Su was trying to make a fool of us? He should have known that brat Qin was a true overlord body, but purposely said that he was lying to him while in truth he was lying to us to humiliate us. There's this possibility. Human Emperor Ishan slapped his thigh fiercely and shouted out, That's your style, brat. He is your disciple, so he is definitely like you, lying without blinking his eyes. Human Emperor Qikang's fists crackled from his clenching and he sneered. The brat went to find first ancestor. When he comes back, see how will I teach him a lesson. It's how will we teach him a lesson. Everyone sneered in unison. At that moment, in secret territories in the depths of great ruins, there was a faint glow in the darkness. Village chief floated through an ancient ruin, coming to another wonderful world. After walking for a moment, he finally revealed a smile. In front of him was a cluster of ancient buildings that had an interesting and appealing grace of a foreign land that the current generation didn't possess. He searched for a moment and finally found the person he was looking for. The man stood in front of a stone tablet beside a palace, reading the inscriptions there. What's first ancestor looking at? Village chief asked curiously. This is the last ruin of High Emperor era. When the celestial heavens of High Emperor era were wiped out, the remaining survivors escaped here and rebuilt High Emperor Sanctuary. This place was akin to their carefree village, but it was wiped out later on. I'm looking for their history. First ancestor didn't look back. The records they left behind are too few, but I found this. Village chief was slightly stunned while looking at the stone tablet. What's recorded there? The legend of the overlord body from 40,000 years ago. Tales of herding gods. Chapter 504 of a Common Origin. Village chief felt as though he had been struck by lightning and stood dumbfounded in front of the stone tablet. Legend of the overlord body? From 40,000 years ago. Wasn't overlord body something he made up to fool Qin Mu and the people in the village? Could this world truly have an overlord body? No. There must some mistake here. Maybe the overlord body from 40,000 years ago isn't the same as the overlord body I explained. His heart was flustered, and all kinds of thoughts flooded him. However, village chief was village chief, so he soon cleared his mind. Maybe there's truly an overlord body in this world, which is a kind of spirit body. Since it was too strong, it was called overlord body by others. This kind of overlord body would be completely different from the overlord body that I made up. He composed himself and looked at the stone tablet. The inscriptions were written using the writings of the dragon race, so village chief could only ask first ancestor for help. What's written here? The writings of the dragon race are profound and hard to understand, and I've not learned them before. First ancestor was very easy to talk to and said, What's written is that before High Emperor fell, my family of the dragon race had met a youth who called himself the overlord body. He was talented in many fields and could do what others couldn't. He was unmatched among his peers. He had a luminous charm and his talent was matchless. No matter if it was sword skills or divine arts, they surpassed High Emperor era by leaps and bounds. Thus, they asked him what was overlord body. The youth then explained that overlord body was matchless. Before the spirit embryo awakened, it would look like a mortal body. But once it was awakened, it gained supreme power and topped his own generation, while also possessing exceptional aptitude. The corners of village chief's eyes twitched. Qin Mu was different from the other spirit bodies because he wasn't a spirit body at all. The spirit embryo divine treasure of a spirit body was awakened at the start, yet Qin Mu's spirit embryo divine treasure had been shut. The spirit embryo divine treasure of an ordinary person was also shut, so they couldn't cultivate. On the other hand, under the lies of village chief and the aid of the villagers, Qin Mu had actually opened the spirit embryo divine treasure that couldn't be opened. From then on, he improved at a godly speed and showed rapid progress. This kind of situation was actually very similar to what was written on the stone tablet. It must be a coincidence. Village chief composed himself and listened once more to what first ancestor was saying. Overlord body cultivates, it surpasses other spirit bodies by a huge margin. Its comprehension is outstanding, understanding everything straight away and able to comprehend by analogy, deducing many things from one case. The overlord body is matchless, but there are still enemies in this world, the things known as pseudo-overlord bodies. Village chief shook his head and blurted out, "What? What's written on it says that even though the overlord body is matchless, there is still pseudo-overlord bodies that are its enemies," first ancestor explained patiently. It's written that overlord body and pseudo-overlord bodies fight over fate, having a connection between them. Pseudo-overlord bodies will fight overlord body to seize its fate, making themselves into the true overlord body. How weird. Why is there such a marvelous physique? I'm ashamed to say this, but when I heard about this overlord body in the past, I had only treated it as a legend. Never had I expected that legend to be real. Village chief's mind was blown, but after a moment, he came back to his senses and stuttered, First ancestor, you have heard about the legend of the overlord body before?" First ancestor nodded. "I've heard once before, but I've never seen the overlord body. I only treated it as a legend." His expression became weird. There actually exists such a fresh and outstanding overlord body. Village chief was silent. He suddenly felt that the surrounding world had become preposterous and variegated. Could the overlord body that he had made up really exist? On top of that, could it be exactly the same as the lie he used to contain Qin Mu? Wasn't this too inconceivable? Back then, to placate the villagers, he had said the first lie about Qin Mu being an overlord body. Over the years, he had to add to that lie to cover up himself, and he had created the full system of overlord body. Yet somehow the stone tablet's description of the overlord body was exactly the same as his overlord body system. He had used those same words to lie to others. But now, when reading about it on the stone tablet, he was starting to believe it himself.
The stone tablet was right in front of him, so he had no choice but to believe. Yet village chief was still struggling. He thought of the crux and hurriedly asked, if there was really an overlord body, why would High Emperor era still be wiped out? It's not written. First ancestor looked over with sorrow and said in a depressed voice, in the face of the billowing wind, the power of one person is too insignificant. So what if he was the overlord body? Wouldn't he still be unable to quell the disturbance in the universe and reinstate peace to the bright world? This overlord body may have been killed before he even grew up. Or maybe his fate had been seized by a pseudo-overlord body, or he could have abandoned himself to despair at being powerless during the end of High Emperor era, hiding somewhere full of remorse and becoming a tortoise like me. There are simply too many possibilities. A person is simply too minute in the face of history. He seemed to be talking about his own circumstances when talking about the overlord body from 40,000 years ago. When he finished, he sighed and didn't speak anymore. Village chief examined the stone tablet from both sides before growing excited. He took out some ink and paper to record the writings on the stone tablet. First ancestor raised his eyebrows, and village chief smiled and said, I'm going to write down these things and bring them back for the other human emperors to see. The true overlord body, there is really an overlord body. I've taken a true overlord body as my disciple for the human emperor position. Look at this stone tablet, it will definitely make me happy. First ancestor examined him with astonishment before continuing on his way. According to the stone tablet, High Emperor Sanctuary was wiped out after High Emperor era ended. I can't help being worried about Carefree Village, too. Village chief immediately caught up to him and asked, what first ancestor mean is? I'm worried about Carefree Village, first ancestor said solemnly. I haven't gotten any news of Carefree Village for a long time. Even though it had sent messages a few times and passed down founding emperor's orders, I'm suspecting that it's no longer the dauntless, go-getter founding emperor from before. Carefree, He who gives no thought to far-flung problems soon finds suffering nearby. They've been staying too long in Carefree Village. I was against building it back then and wanted to fight to the end. Village chief muttered irresolutely to himself before asking, so the purpose of First Ancestor was to find the people of founding Emperor era? High Emperor era has been gone for way too long, so it's impossible for any survivors to have lasted till now. No. There are still people alive. First Emperor looked around. This High Emperor sanctuary had gathered the survivors of High Emperor era and gone through numerous years of development. Their power wasn't small and wouldn't be any inferior to that of the current carefree village. This place was later invaded by enemies, and I found from the scattered records from the ruin outside that there were people who escaped alive to create another hometown. I wanted to find them to ally them with carefree village, so maybe we could do something big. Village chief was solemn for a moment. If the most flourishing period of founding emperor era couldn't overthrow the heaven, then even if you find the former subordinates of founding emperor, your chances will be far inferior to those of the flourishing period. If you didn't find them to ally together during your strongest, what's the use of finding them now? First Ancestor expression grew pained, and he said astringently, I know. But I also know that if they continue to hide in carefree village and not do anything, there will be no hope forever. I need to do something, be busy. If I stay quiet, my thoughts run wild. I see my comrades dying in front of me, I see the disaster wiping out all the people, I see people struggling in a terrifying place like hell. I need to do something. He was insistent and full of his obsession. However, village chief understood his feelings and sentiments. I'll go with you. When Qin Mu came to the residence of the past cult masters of Heavenly Saint Cultin Fengdu, he looked around and saw numerous ghost messengers and ghost servants hurrying about. Compared to the impoverished past human emperors of Hall of Human Emperors, this place was much more bustling with ghosts coming and going. The palaces were also extraordinarily imposing, making it obvious that the past cult masters of Heavenly Saint Cult received the offerings of Heavenly Saint Cult. They weren't like the past human emperors of Hall of Human Emperors who, because of the sparse number of people, had no one to sweep their tombs and were all poverty-stricken. Only First Ancestor, whose corporeal body was petrified and stood in Little Jade Capital, still received some offerings from time to time, so there were some rations at his home, enough to give material assistance to Second Ancestor, Third Ancestor, and the rest. The palaces of Heavenly Saint Cult stood in row upon row with glazed tiles and vermilion rafters. They were richly ornamented and had layers of towers and pavilions. Between palaces were various formations of long corridors as passageways to connect the palaces together. Numerous imps carried all kinds of bouquets and fruit plates all the time. The whole place was bustling with activity. Qin Mu sighed ruefully. The people here had also become ghosts, but the treatment was much different. He went to one palace and raised his head up to look. The place was called Hall of Zuyang, so he thought, could this be the palace hall of Cult Master Zuyang? Cult Master Zuyang was the Heavenly Saint Cult Master before Li Tianqing. Qin Mu didn't know much about his past achievements, just that Saint Arrival Mountain had a Hall of Zuyang. Never did he expect that there would be one in Fengdu as well. In front of the hall was a young person carving a guardian lion with a chisel. Beside him, some imps were picking up shattered rocks. Qin Mu was about to enter the hall when that youth asked, "What are you here for?" Qin Mu smiled and said, "I'm here to find Cult Master Zuyang." The youth examined him up and down before placing down his hammer and chisel. Beside him, an imp lifted a jade plate to take them. Another imp fetched a jade basin for him to wash his hands while another imp offered a towel. The youth cleaned his hands and asked in astonishment, "You have never seen Cult Master Zuyang before?" "You are Cult Master Zuyang?" Qin Mu asked in astonishment. The youth nodded with a smile. "I am. I see you are all bones, so you should still be alive. But what's weird is that you aren't Li Tianqing. He was my disciple, so I wouldn't forget him." "You are the next cult master?" His interest was roused and he asked excitedly, "You got rid of Li Tianqing?" Qin Mu hurriedly shook his head and said, "Cult Master Li's soul has already scattered. He risked his life against Xing'an, but he didn't manage to defeat him. Even though I couldn't stand Cult Master Li's character, he still knew how to repent right before he died. It was truly admi." "His soul scattered?" Wonderful. Cult Master Zhu Yang clapped with a laugh. Wonderful death. During my later years, I didn't want to give up the position, so that brat took advantage of me when I was cultivating 9 Wither 9 Thrive mystery technique and challenged me while my chi and blood had withered. He heavily injured me and seized the position of the cult master. I was severely injured, but when my life came to an end, that scoundrel still came to shed crocodile tears in front of my grave. Qin Mu was flabbergasted. After a moment, he asked, "May I ask, where is Heavenly Saint Patriarch?" "Who is Heavenly Saint Patriarch?" Cult Master Zhu Yang was stunned for a moment before he came to realization. "You are talking about my little senior uncle, right? During the later years of my Grand Master, he took in a disciple. My little senior uncle had never been the cult master before, and he was even younger than me. After I beat my master to death, he actually blamed me, so wanted to get rid of him too. However, I was afraid of the people in the cult complaining, so I gave him an idle appointment to be the Heavenly Saint Cult Patriarch, sending him far, far away. Master, over here. The little cult master of our Heavenly Saint cult is here to visit us." A black-robed man walked out of the palace from the side. He also had a handsome appearance and looked 30-40 years old. He had a majestic appearance and was extraordinarily handsome. When he heard the words, he came over and asked in astonishment, "Little cult master? Our Heavenly Saint cult has changed another cult master? How did you die?" Cult Master Zhu Yang smiled. "Little cult master hasn't died yet. Look, he is in a skeleton form. He's here to find your junior brother, which is my little senior uncle." The black-robed man walked over and examined Qin Mu. He smiled then. "You are indeed not dead. Have you taken in a disciple?" Qin Mu immediately greeted him and said, "Greetings, Cult Master Yu Lian. I have yet to take in a disciple." "Don't take in a disciple so soon. The sooner you take one in, the sooner you will die. Look, I was assassinated by my good disciple." Cult Master Yu Lian turned around and showed sword in the back of his chest. He then repeated his warning with good intentions. "Look, this sword was stabbed there by my good disciple." Cult Master Zhu Yang was pleased with himself and said with a smile, "Master, you still have the face to carry that sword? What did you say when you assassinated Grand Mistress?"
Cult Master Yu Lian chuckled with a pleased expression. "Your Grand Mistress wanted to pass down the position to little junior brother. So if I didn't assassinate her, how could I have become the Cult Master Sacred Teacher? How would you then have been able to assassinate me to become Cult Master?" "That's right. Who did little Cult Master assassinate to become the Cult Master Sacred Teacher?" Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 505. Week-old thieves, unable to withstand a single blow. Qin Mu's face blackened. Only after a moment did he remember that he had no face to turn black. Heavenly Devil Cult's tradition seemed a little different from what he had imagined. Not only was there no 3 knives and 6 holes punishment for assassinating a cult master, it was actually a kind of traditional virtue. The cult masters treated assassinating the cult master to take their position as an honor. "I never assassinated anyone. I was chosen by Heavenly Saint Patriarch, who promoted me to the cult master," Qin Mu said while holding back his temper. "Master! Master!" Cult Master Yu Lian waved to a young girl. "Little cult master is here, and he's a freak. He actually didn't assassinate the previous cult master, and just stepped up to the position of the cult master." The young girl walked out of her palace and headed over to their side. She then said in astonishment, "There actually was such an incident? You didn't seduce your master, spoil their Tao heart, or make them lose to you in a fight?" Qin Mu shook his head. "Nope. It was Heavenly Saint Patriarch who made the decision and passed the position to me. Spoiling the tradition of my Heavenly Saint cult." The young girl was charming, with 2 big silver and glittering earrings on her ears. But she had a slight look of disdain toward Qin Mu as she said, "Fighting with brains and bronze with the master is the fine tradition of my Heavenly Saint cult. And you actually threw away this tradition. How boring. If you don't challenge the master, how can the next generation become stronger than the previous one? Your position as the cult master is not attained through proper methods. Qin Mu was flabbergasted and didn't know what to say. The young girl should have been from C family, and according to the sequence of the past cult masters, she should be cult master Xianxia, an ancestor of Granny C. C family rarely had a cult master, but there were still one or two. Xianxia was one of them. I was originally the saintess of the sacred cult, but then I made cult master Fu Yun fall crazy in love with me and spoiled his Dao heart. Cult master Fu Yun then sighed ruefully and said that the sacred cult would definitely be even stronger in my hands. So he enlightened me and expounded my wisdom. Yet you relied on Patriarch's assistance to get the position of the cult master, so you are illegitimately conferred. Cult master Zhu Yang sneered. Grand Mistress, the one that passed the position to him is my little senior uncle, so now you know how wrong it was to pass the position to little senior uncle, right? Little senior uncle spoiled the long-lasting tradition of my heavenly saint cult after becoming heavenly saint patriarch. This little cult master didn't get rid or even heavily injure the previous cult master and still had the face to visit us. Xianxui's face turned slightly red. I thought little Wen Yuan looked handsome and would spoil my Dao heart, seizing the position of the cult master from me, so I never expect your master to assassinate me. However, Wen Yuan really broke my heart by doing such a thing. Isn't he already dead? We can then get him over to ask. Master Hu Jun, have you seen Wen Yuan? A bewitching handsome man walked over with a smile. I've seen him just now. He was being bothered by a huge skeleton which said to come from the world of the living. It wrapped around him and wept, making him cry a great deal as well. He should be somewhere wiping his snot now. This is our sacred cult's new cult master, Xianxia said heedlessly. His position of cult master didn't come properly. It was actually not fought for but passed down. How embarrassing. Something like that actually happened? Cult master Hu Jun's face turned cold and he sneered. Of course, each age brings forth a new genius on this noble land, and each generation is worse than the previous. The men of today have sadly degenerated, and even a sacred cult master's position is no longer even fought for. Do you have a firm hold of your empire? Qin Mu remained patient. Fellow cult masters, I was supported by the hall masters of 360 halls and the protectors and the heavenly kings. Only then did I ascend to the position of the cult master. Truth be told, the sacred cult has flourished more and more in my hands and far surpasses the past. Big words. Another few past cult masters walked over, and a handsome man sneered when he heard his words. Flourished more and more? I've heard that Eternal Peace Empire is the one in power now in the world of the living. It has annexed the world, so how are you making the sacred cult flourish? Are you going to betray the cult to seek glory, allowing the emperor to become the cult master? Qin Mu held back his anger and smiled. Who is this? The handsome man spread open his folded fan and said, You have not gone to Hall of Yu Guang on my Saint Arrival Mountain? I'm Cult Master Yu Guang. Qin Mu laughed loudly and said, I've never paid my respects to the rotten woods in the halls before. On Saint Arrival Mountain I only respect Woodcutter, Founding Master, and also the Three Kings. Other cult masters in my eyes are merely flies and not worthy of my respect. How daring! Another few cult masters came forward and Qin Mu looked over. All of the people were all handsome men and pretty women. It created an obvious difference between Heavenly Devil Cult and Hall of Human Emperors. No matter if it was men or women, anyone could be a human emperor in Hall of Human Emperors since they didn't care about their looks, letting their complexions grow old. They would rarely preserve their youth. But the cult masters of Heavenly Saint Cult were different. Great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures had 7 writings of creation, and cultivating them could allow one to preserve their looks forever. They could even return their appearance back to when they were youths. Qin Mu looked at the sacred cult masters. They were mostly young men and women who looked beautiful. Even the young patriarch looked young and paid attention to his appearance. Little cult master also most likely didn't pay his respects to me. Feng Chenggu in Hall of Chenggu, right? Cult master Chenggu walked forward and sneered. Your position of the cult master was passed down and not snatched using your own strength. Your origin is improper and you still dare say that we are flies and don't deserve respect. What do you have that deserves our respect? That's right. You are illegitimately conferred, so how do you have the face to visit us and meet your ancestors? You don't even respect the rules of the sacred cult and show no respect to us, your ancestors. Aren't you deceiving the master and destroying your ancestors at such a young age? Little cult master. This continued for a while. Silence. Qin Mu shouted in anger when he could no longer take it. The surroundings became quiet. Qin Mu laughed loudly and unfolded his robes to both sides while saying loudly, "When I succeeded the position, the followers' livelihood had been close to destitution, and there were many things waiting to be done. This was the mess that the previous cult master, Li Tianxing, had left for me. After stepping into my position, I reformed the merits and drawbacks, allying us with eternal peace to expel Buddhism and inflict serious damage on Tao sect, causing these two big sacred grounds to concede defeat. I changed the laws and cleared the way, expanded the teachings, set up school hall, founded Heavenly Saint Academy, gathered the paths, skills, and divine arts of all sects and cults in the world to correct the reputation of my cult. I founded the 18th sword form and established the primordial spirit in 6 directions. The men of my cult are now located prominently in the 10,000 miles from the east to the west. The highest one is Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, and the lowest ones are commoners and pawns. In all levels of society, there are people of our cult. With my cultivation of 7 stars realm, I've already achieved this much." He looked around the past sacred cult masters of Heavenly Devil Cult and sneered. "What about you guys? Under your hands, the sacred cult had fallen into the devil path and was called Heavenly Devil Cult, being scolded and dismissed by everyone. What is called the path of the saint is none other than the everyday use of common people, yet you had taken a perfectly fine path of the saint and refined it into the path of the devil, turning it into the devil cult. A saint has to establish his virtue, his merit, and his ideas in writing, so what have you guys done? I respect Saint Woodcutter for imparting his scriptures on the rock and imparting skills to all ages. I respect Founding Master for expounding the wisdom of an ancient sage, founding a cult and establish his ideas in writing. I respect the 3 cult masters of Hall of 3 Kings who sacrificed themselves in moments of danger to preserve the inheritance. But what about you guys?" Qin Mu sneered. "What merit have you established? What virtue? What ideas? Misinterpreting the teachings, cultivating devil techniques, making Heavenly Saint Cult have to carry the reputation of a devil cult. How do I have the face to meet the ancestors? Have the merits you guys established been as big as a finger of mine? Are you guys qualified to be cult masters? Qualified to be sacred teachers? I'm not here to find you guys, since you guys are mediocre and don't even possess the face to meet me." The surroundings went silent. The sacred cult masters of Heavenly Saint Cult were even more numerous than the human emperors of Hall of Human Emperors, but most of them had died miserably, so their cultivations hadn't been high enough to enter Fengdu. Thus the number of sacred cult masters in Fengdu wasn't that much higher. Even so, there were close to 30 cult masters gathered, and they were another huge force in Fengdu that few people dared to provoke. Qin Mu's long speech had blown everyone's mind, and the situation had grown terrifyingly cold. Suddenly, the young patriarch's voice reached them. "What's happening? Everyone's here. I'm late. I'm late." Qin Mu looked over and saw cold sweat on the young patriarch's forehead. He was hurrying over with the large skeleton of Dragon Qilin following closely behind him. The young patriarch hurried over and squeezed into the crowd. The cold sweat on his forehead grew as he chuckled. "Cult masters, how did a simple talk escalate into a quarrel? This is the current Heavenly Saint Cult Master, outstanding talent in the present age that holds to the teachings on the rocks. Cult Master Qin is here to find me, so let's go. Come to my place for a seat." The disciples of the sacred cult had burned quite some good things for me. The Heavenly Devil Cult Masters in the surroundings were motionless. Cold sweat rolled down young patriarch's forehead as he tugged onto Qin Mu's clothes. He gritted his teeth and said, "Your words are too ruthless. Lower your head and apologize to the ancestors." "Apologize? There's no need for that." Cult Master Zhu Yang laughed loudly and said leisurely, Cult Master Qin's small body could actually explode with such astonishing words that were so loud that even the deaf could hear. We were all stunned. The young patriarch's expression changed slightly. Cult Master Zhu Yang seemed to be angered. For the more pleasant his smile was, the greater was his fury. Qin Mu smiled and said, "Cult Master Zhu Yang is trying to imply something, so why won't he speak his mind?" The young patriarch was very anxious while Cult Master Zhu Yang just smiled. The Cult Master of Heavenly Saint Cult should be good in a fight and not talk with a glib mouth. Your position of the Cult Master was attained improperly, but since Li Tianxing is already dead, why don't we old bones substitute him to test you? Let's see if you have the right to be the Cult Master Sacred Teacher. The young patriarch hurriedly tugged on the corner of Qin Mu's shirt, signaling for him to reject. To fight on the same realm? Truth be told, I just beat everyone in Hall of Human Emperors. Qin Mu gently pushed his hand away and said with a smile, "All the human emperors of Hall of Human Emperors are top-notch figures and fighting them was tiring. As for fellow past cult masters, if we are fighting on the same realm..." His voice grew indifferent. "Come up all at once." The sweat rolled down young patriarch's forehead like rain. The expressions of the past cult masters changed drastically, and Cult Master Yu Lian chuckled. "Cult Master Qin is enthusiastic, but for us to go all together, aren't you too haughty? For example, let me first test Cult Master Qin's methods." Qin Mu shook his head. "Your realm isn't enough. One realm as one heaven, one frame of mind as one pass. I stand on top of the pass while looking at all of you, seeing everything clearly. I'm asking all of you guys to come together because I'm respectful of the elderly. If Cult Master Yu Lian wants to fight me alone, wouldn't you be overestimating yourself?" The young patriarch sighed and took in a long breath before saying solemnly, "Cult Master Sacred Teachers, you have to keep your promises when you speak. Everyone seal your celestial being, life and death, and divine bridge, these three great divine treasures. As for whether you guys want to fight alone or go together, it's all up to you guys. Anyway, I'm not the sacred cult master, so just do what you like." Cult Master Yu Lian was the first to seal his three great divine treasures and take a step forward. With a shout, his devil technique burst forth. His great educational heavenly devil scriptures walked down the devil path, and he was truly a great master of the devil path. He had comprehended the paths, skills, and divine arts in great educational heavenly devil scriptures to the extremes of the devil path. Taking one step was a series of specters. Great educational heavenly devil scriptures are merely an incomplete writing of my Overlord Body 3 elixir technique, yet it was still refined into the devil path by you. Qin Mu narrowed his eyes and struck out with a palm. He was fast as lightning in hitting the specters. Great overarching heavenly stars palm force. Boom! Cult Master Yu Lian flew back and created a human-shaped hole in Hall of Zhu Yang. Next, a series of rumbles rang out from the hall. Cult Master Yu Lian had crashed through over a dozen walls and still couldn't stop. Finally, a mushroom cloud appeared 10 miles away. It was impossible to say how many things he had hit before coming to a stop. Everyone was yet to come back to their senses when Qin Mu moved and came to the back of Cult Master Zhu Yang. The man's reaction was extremely fast, and he pounced forward, transforming into a shadow that stuck to the floor. Qin Mu stomped the floor, and the ground split apart, creating a deep ditch. Cult Master Zhu Yang's true body was shaken out from the black shadow form, and a knife slashed down straight at his face. He shouted in anger, and black tortoise body appeared. The huge shield split when it met the knife, and he got blown away with two halves of the broken shield. Qin Mu rushed into the group of the past cult masters and moved around like a phantom. Everyone was astonished, but they didn't waste time before retaliating upon sensing his attacks. Bang, bang, bang. A series of explosions rang out when Cult Master Yu Guang's divine art hit Feng Chengu's body, and Feng Chengu's devil sword stabbed into Si Yanwei's chest. In an instant, everyone was in a mess. The young patriarch immediately moved back to avoid being caught by the fray. He then saw the ground splitting and shattering. The entire hall of Zhu Yang broke into pieces under the attacks of numerous divine arts, and the broken hall floated into the sky. Everyone was leaping around the debris. Their heads were sometimes up and sometimes down. Sometimes they were shadows on some pillar, and sometimes they transformed into flying or jumping beasts. What you used is Dao sword of Dao sect, you traitor. A past cult master roared angrily as he suffered hundreds of swords. He then collapsed headfirst. Scoundrel. This is great Thunderclap Monastery's technique. This is the divine art of Little Jade Capital. What sword skill is this? Bang, bang, bang. Figures fell down while the shattered palace rose higher and higher. On the glazed tiles and the vermilion rafters, Qin Mu and Cult Master Hu Jun's bodies crossed. Qin Mu used secrets of seal word to seal the 5 senses of his opponents. He then turned around and used yin yang heaven flipping hands, and with a raise and lowering of his palm, he made Cult Master Hu Jun puke blood as he fell. The glazed tiles of the huge hall split apart as Cult Master Yan Ji came over. But what welcomed him was a huge divine art from Qin Mu, Celestial Cave and Milky Way hanging from Jade Heaven. The 10,000 stars brought a terrifying palm force to descend from the sky, breaking through Cult Master Yan Ji's divine art like it was rotten wood. Qin Mu's palm ruthlessly smacked him down to the ground with a Milky Way. Boom! In the air, numerous crumbling fences and dilapidated walls fell down, and the ground shook violently. Where numerous heavenly devil cult masters had landed, there was a huge palm that had an area of 3 to 5 fields. Weak old thieves, unable to withstand a single blow, Qin Mu landed on the ground and dusted off his clothes. He looked at the dumbfounded young patriarch and smiled. Patriarch, let's go to your place for a talk. Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 506 Sacred Teacher. Hall of Wen Yuan was young patriarch's place, and it was much shabbier than the halls of the cult masters. This was probably because patriarch had never been a cult master before, and his status was much lower than that of the cult masters. However, in Qin Mu's eyes, it was also because the young patriarch had never been the cult master sacred teacher that he could drop the baggage and achieve things that those cult masters had never done. The young patriarch and Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor were half teacher and student and half friends. When Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor came to visit him, he took the initiative to show him great educational heavenly devil scriptures and also told him about the general teachings of the path of the saint. He then personally wrote a letter to recommend that young man to Dao sect and Great Thunderclap Monastery. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's huge achievements were related to him by a lot too. Afterward, when Eternal Peace started his reform, it was also related to the young patriarch. Even the founding of Imperial College also had very deep relations with him. He was the first Grand Chancellor of Imperial College, and when Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor carried out his reform, he would frequently seek his opinion. Eternal Peace had 3 big players in the reform. The 2 big players, Imperial Preceptor and Emperor, were out in the open while the young patriarch was the 3rd big player hidden behind their backs. Just based on achievements in the entire history of the sacred cult, there was at most 2-3 other people who could match up to the achievements of the young patriarch. Yet because he wasn't the cult master, he didn't receive the treatment of the other cult masters, and this made Qin Mu felt grief for him. You still haven't changed your temper. The young patriarch brought Qin Mu into the hall while the huge bones and scales of a dragon Qilin kept rubbing against him. It was to the point that the young patriarch's clothes were already torn and his leg had turned bright red. Yet he acted like it was nothing and said to Qin Mu, "What now? All the past cult masters have been beaten up by you. Do you think they are easy to get along with? They are a force in Fengdu. After you die of old age, how are you going to stand in Fengdu? Patriarch?" Qin Mu suddenly hugged him tightly as his voice shook slightly. He didn't let him go even after a long time. "I missed you." The skeleton boy wanted to wipe his tears, but there were no tears to be wiped. He choked as he said, "I didn't know you were blocking off the gods of high heavens in great ruins and only heard about it later from Xianxia. Elder of Discipline brought your ashes back, but I wasn't able to meet you one last time. So I'm here to see you now. I kept hiding it from Fatty Dragon, not daring to tell him, but I couldn't any longer." The young patriarch was stunned. He patted the youth's back and sighed ruefully. "I'm only living elsewhere. Look, I still have flesh and blood. In my eyes, you guys are the dead ones, so should I cry miserably too?" There. Cult Master Qin was so fierce when scolding and beating up all the ancestors, so why are you acting like a small child now? Enough, Dragon Qilin. My leg is bleeding from your rubs. Haven't you rubbed enough? The Dragon Qilin wanted to stick his tongue out to help him lick his injury, but he then remembered that he had no tongue. He then reluctantly retreated, but after a moment, he couldn't resist coming up to rub himself against the leg again. The young patriarch was speechless. He had not met the Dragon Qilin for a long time, so when they first met, they even cried a whole lot because they had been close before. But as that fatty dragon kept rubbing against his leg, he was starting to get really annoyed. In a moment, there was nothing he wanted more than to send that fellow far away. I've thought about meeting Saint Woodcutter, who had imparted his teachings on the rock and also founding master, as well as the three kings, Qin Mu said. Patriarch, are they also in Fengdu? You can't see the three sacred kings anymore. Their souls have dispersed, the young patriarch said sorrowfully. They died in battle while forcing themselves to impart the teachings on the rock to the next cult master, so they couldn't protect their own souls and enter Fengdu. I thought I would meet founding master here as well, but I've not seen him. Saint Woodcutter is not here too. Qin Mu was stunned. Besides Fengdu, where else could Saint Woodcutter and founding master have gone? The stone statue of Woodcutter's corporeal body still stood in Little Jade Capital, looking toward great ruins. His primordial spirit had left his body and went to other places. After founding master established his cult and set his ideas in writing, he had not established merit, so he still wasn't a saint.
The young patriarch hesitated and said, "You beat up the past cult masters." "Patriarch, I'm a cult master, and they are also cult masters, so why should I be lower than them? I'm still a human emperor too, so my status is even above theirs. If you want me to talk to them nicely, I can't do it," Qin Mu said. "The sacred cult has no seniority, and the one who discovers the truth should be the teacher. Even though they are the past cult masters, they also have their own strength of character. If I didn't beat them, they would say that my cult master title was not attained properly. After beating them, they were speechless. Besides, the sacred cult in their hands had no achievements and their way is corrupted, so they deserved to be beaten." The young patriarch sighed and asked curiously, "You don't have your corporeal body, so how did you use your magic power?" "I've come here once with village chief, and it was then that I realized that me turning into a skeleton was merely an illusion. Since it was an illusion, my corporeal body disappearing and you guys coming back to life is also an illusion. Grandpa Blind's divine eyes allowed me to see through everything in Fengdu, and it was from then on that I could use magic power and divine arts in Fengdu. I can sense my own corporeal body. Patriarch, you don't know this, but in my eyes." Boundless sorrow flooded his heart, and he didn't continue to speak. In front of his divine eyes, Patriarch, who was living perfectly fine, was only a skeleton. When Qin Mu walked in Fengdu City, that was all he saw. Everyone walking to and fro in the bustling city of Fengdu were all skeletons and ghosts. Only he was moving through the city with a corporeal body. He was a lonely soul, isolated and alone. Even when he talked cheerfully with the past human emperors in Sacred Hall of Five Yang, he had only been talking with dozens of skeletons. Only within between life and death did he saw the past human emperors gain flesh and blood. This was the sight Qin Mu saw when he used the divine eyes Blind had imparted to him. His sight was completely different from the sight the ghosts in Fengdu saw. In the living realm, life and death were reversed, but Patriarch, the past human emperors, and the past cult masters were still dead. Qin Mu didn't say all of this. He was silent for a moment before smiling. "Patriarch, you, Imperial Preceptor, and the Emperor are in charge of the reform. Now that you're here, how will the reform continue on?" The young patriarch walked side by side with him to prevent the Dragon Qilin from coming up again. He smiled and said, "The path of the reform has already started and it won't end. What Imperial Preceptor is reforming are the traditions, the slave nature, the fights between sects, so that the divine arts practitioners in the world need not fight for the sects anymore and exhaust their own power for nothing. It is also to change the individual mindset of the sects, to let divine arts practitioners work for the people and serve them. This is the great idea and the great framework. He came to the back garden of Hall of Wen Yuan and handed a pair of shears to Qin Mu. He also took one for himself and trimmed the sprays carefully. The most important thing about the reform is that it changes the bad habits in the hearts of people, pushing down the god statues within them. Destroying gods in people's hearts is not something divine arts practitioners have to do, but something the whole world has to do. If everyone could destroy the God and Buddha in their hearts, this would become a world of prosperity. Qin Mu trimmed the sprays and turned a blossom into a hen dragon without feathers. When the young patriarch finished speaking, he stopped and pondered his words before nodding. The people of the world pray to the gods and Buddhas for wind, rain, and a bountiful harvest, for their family to prosper and have lots of children. If the divine arts practitioners could fulfill their wishes, it could indeed assist in breaking the gods in their hearts. The young patriarch looked at the flowers and plants that were messily trimmed by him and shifted his gaze after a moment. I've said it to Imperial Preceptor before, that to break the gods in the hearts, he'll first need to reform the economy. It will improve the statecraft and aid the people. When the economy is open, the knowledge of the people will be opened. To put it in simple words, when divine arts practitioners will use their divine arts to help the farmers harvest their crops, the farmers will pay them, and with the money received, they'll buy food or resources they need for cultivation.
This money would then return to the people's hands. They all have to pay taxes to the empire, so the empire would grow wealthy. When the empire is wealthy, it can open more traffic and irrigation works, which are all for the convenience and benefit of the people. Thus, when the empire is wealthy, people are wealthy. When people are wealthy, the resources are abundant. Divine arts practitioners will be able to buy all kinds of resources, and their cultivations would naturally far surpass the past. The people would become strong, and the empire would become strong. Qin Mu was enthralled, but he suddenly heard footsteps. When he turned back to look, he saw Cult Master Zhu Yang, Cult Master Yu Lian, Cult Master Si Yanwei, and the rest entering Hall of Wen Yuan with murderous intent. Heavenly devil cult's past cult masters didn't make a move, but instead stopped and listened. Common folk has been slaves of influential families for too long, and they now have the nature of slaves. Once you kneel down, it's hard to get up. Imperial Preceptor is now making the people stand up, but this requires time. Still, the reform has been moving slowly. The people now no longer kneel to divine arts practitioners. The young patriarch's thoughts were full of the reform, and he didn't realize the arrival of guests. He reminisced about the past. I've seen the situation before the reform. At that time, the sects and cults stood in numbers, and the farmers slogged their lives out. They had to kneel and call them old masters, offering up meat and rations. To change this kind of slave nature, Imperial Preceptor and I used some 200 years. Once the people stand up, it's also very hard for them to kneel back down. Qin Mu remembered the incident where people knelt in front of the stone statues that had popped out from the earth. They still kneel to God statues. The young patriarch's expression grew a little weird. Imperial Preceptor said that it's easy to break the God in the temple, but it's hard to break the God in the heart. To me, it's not easy to break the God in the temple as well. I've done a small experiment once to test the heart of the people. I built a small temple outside the capital and enlightened a dirty mangy dog, then made it sit on the shrine. Can you guess what happened? He sighed and said, after a few days, the mangy dog's temple was flourishing with incense, and there were countless old men and old women coming forth to give offerings. The virtue box in front of the mangy dog was stuffed with money. If you put a toad on the shrine, not even a mangy dog, people would still stuff it with money and offer incense. Qin Mu laughed, but as he continued, he slowly couldn't laugh anymore. That's why we need to open the economy and wizen the people. Only then could we break the gods in the temples and the God in the hearts, the young patriarch said. And to wizen the people, we need you guys to continue with the reform to increase the number of divine arts practitioners. They need to become more common and become gods. When divine arts practitioners that become gods continue to serve the people will no longer pray to the gods in the temples. With the new wisdom, there will only be more divine arts practitioners. He then added, opening the economy, wizening the people is all part of the path of reform. What you guys are doing now is very good. Divine arts are being used for the people, but time is still required for the people gain wisdom and not kneel to the gods in the temples anymore. This journey is arduous, and it will first touch the benefits of the sex before touching the benefits of the high gods. High heavens are only the dogs of the high gods, so there is probably an even greater danger behind. He trimmed the sprays as he said, "The reform of Imperial Preceptor has added 3 more forms to the sword skills and began the change of the paths and skills in the heaven and earth. You spreading the technique to become God by mending the divine bridge has pushed the reform another step ahead. Xianxia had offered incense and prayed to me, telling me that you and Princess Yushio founded the skill of awakening 6 directions primordial spirit. Numerous divine arts practitioners in Eternal Peace Empire had done their bit to help on the foundation and have by now created numerous techniques and divine arts. These are all great deeds." He straightened his back. With the paths, skills, and divine arts improving day after day, there will be more and more gods in Eternal Peace Empire. In time, the gods in the temples will be broken. And when that happens, we won't be far from breaking the gods in their hearts. Qin Mu's mind trembled, and he threw down the shears. He did a long bow to the ground. "Patriarch is truly the sacred teacher of my heavenly saint cult." The young patriarch also hurriedly threw away his shears and helped him up with a smile. "You are the cult master sacred teacher of our cult, so how could you call me sacred teacher? Quickly get up." At that moment, all the past cult masters in the surroundings bowed lowly to the ground and said in unison, "Sacred teacher." The young patriarch only noticed them now and was at a loss. Sacred teacher is a saint who's a teacher. All the past cult masters aren't deserving to be called the sacred teacher. Only you are worthy of this title and worthy of the respect of all the past cult masters. The young patriarch was flustered, various emotions flooding his heart. He couldn't help the tears that flowed down his face. He had never been a cult master before and was always excluded outside the circle of power in Heavenly Saint cult. He had only carried the burden of Heavenly Saint cult when it was in trouble. That was why he had never even dreamed that he would be like Saint Woodcutter, receiving respect from all the past cult masters. The only one who was worthy of all the cult masters' respect was only Saint Woodcutter, who imparted his teachings on the rock. Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 507, Asking Questions. Now then, I know the aspiration and abilities of Wen Yuan far surpasses those of us, the cult masters. In the back garden of Hall of Wen Yuan, the previous cult masters all stood up and Xianxia sighed ruefully. She suddenly remembered something and asked, "Why did I take you in as a disciple back then? I suddenly feel that my judgment was actually so good." The young patriarch blushed and said, "When Master took me in as a disciple, you said I looked pretty and my aptitude was good. Of course, that important part was that I was pretty." Qin Mu examined his surroundings, and the people around him were all handsome men and pretty women. The past cult masters of Heavenly Devil cult, including the young patriarch, none of them looked angry at the words. Xianxia blushed slightly while smiling. "I remember now. I took you in as a disciple with a plan to use you to break my Tao heart with the affairs between man and woman. My great educational Heavenly Devil scripture mainly cultivated the heart, and I had broken my master's Tao heart, this way taking the position of the cult master. I needed a person who could break my Tao heart. Without destruction there can be no construction. If you could break my Tao heart, you would become the cult master. If you couldn't, I would be able to take another step forward and might just become a god or devil. However, since I kept putting my guard against you, Cult Master Yu Lian managed to take advantage of my inattention in regards to him and assassinated me." Cult Master Yu Lian sounded pleased with himself as he said, "Master only guarded against your affection for little junior brother, but you didn't know it's hard to guard against an attack by a hidden enemy. How old was little junior brother then? You kept being concerned about it. But if you didn't have such thoughts and had guarded against me more, little junior brother might have become the sacred cult master." Qin Mu pondered over it. The devil in Heavenly Devil cult's name could probably be related to this continued tradition between masters and their disciples. This kind of style of master letting the disciple assassinate oneself couldn't not be called evil. It was like Li Tianxing, When he was assassinated by Granny C, she was only on Celestial Being Realm, so she absolutely couldn't have used her true strength to kill Li Tianxing, who was already on Divine Bridge Realm. Yet Li Tianxing had given her this chance. The fights between masters and disciples of Heavenly Devil Cult should have originated from Founding Master, whose motive was to make one generation stronger than the previous one. So he had established the rule that when a disciple defeated their master, they could become Heavenly Devil Cult Master. However, this kind of rule had gradually changed. With the strangeness of great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures, it was easy to give birth to the devil nature. As a result, the rule that looked very good on paper had gradually changed to what it was now. The young patriarch smiled and said, "If I had become the sacred cult master, I would most likely have become like everyone, worrying about the benefits of Heavenly Saint Cult and not the people of the world. Not being the cult master had instead made me whole." All the past cult master nodded in agreement. As for cult master Qin, Xianxia turned to look at Qin Mu and stood silent for a moment. "We won't argue about how your position of the cult master wasn't attained properly. After you've become the cult master, you've done well, but if it was us, we could have also done well." Qin Mu was humble. "This is natural. All the previous cult masters are dragons and phoenixes among humans, so if you were in my position, you would definitely do even better than me. It's just that when you guys were in my position, you guys did nothing." The faces of all the past cult master twitched, and their expressions flickered between dark and clear as they fought back the urge to get rid of him. The brat was fearless, but he was the sacred cult master too. He carried the important responsibility of passing down his position and the teachings on the rock, so if they got rid of him, Heavenly Devil Cult would be finished. "I was impolite just now, since I felt indignant that seniors are using wrong and outdated rules to limit the later generation, so I offended all of you. I hereby apologize to all the past cult masters," Qin Mu said. The expressions of the cult masters softened, and cult master Zhu Yang immediately helped him up with a smile. "Little cult master Qin has done what we didn't do, and that makes us admire you endlessly. Among the past cult masters, even if you can't rank in the top 3, you could still rank in the top 5. People say everything is empty after death, and we won't bear any grudge just because of a small quarrel." Cult Master Hu Jun smiled and said, "Other than admiring your attainments in cultivation, we are more worried that after you go back, you won't let the cult followers burn offering for us every new year and festive occasions." "You're right. Extremely right." Everyone laughed and said, "We don't want to become like those poverty-stricken people from Hall of Human Emperor. They don't even have a person to burn offerings for them. The current Human Emperor of Hall of Human Emperor is really unfilial, not giving any offering every new year and on festive occasions. Look at how glorious the human emperors were when they were alive, and look at how poor they are now. How are they like us? Glorious when we are alive and glorious even after death." Everyone laughed loudly, and the young patriarch also gave a few chuckles. But he then suddenly remembered Qin Mu and immediately glanced at him. Qin Mu also gave a few dry laughs. Luckily he had no face now, or he would have definitely blushed. The past cult masters of Heavenly Devil Cult didn't know his other identity was the current human emperor, and that the past human emperors were so poor because he didn't give any offerings. "After returning to eternal peace, I must take a trip to Hall of Human Emperors and allow the past human emperors live wealthily. They can't be too poor." He set a new resolve in his heart. "Cult Master Qin," the young patriarch said with a righteous expression, "you have come to meet me, so what are you going to do after returning to the world of the living?" Everyone's laughs stopped, and they all looked at him to see how he would answer. Qin Mu was solemn for a moment before smiling. "After returning to Eternal Peace Empire, I will first open roads." "Open roads?" The young patriarch frowned and said, "It's true that the traffic and roads make it convenient for the people to travel, but the cost is also great. Eternal Peace Empire has gone through numerous battles and the treasury is empty. You regard the lives of people as important, so why would you open the roads first? The roads of Eternal Peace Empire are already good, so if you open more now, won't it be a waste of manpower and resources?" Qin Mu sighed ruefully. "This is because I've just conquered West Earth." The young patriarch's heart trembled violently, and he cried out, You led the army to invade West Earth? How big was the army you brought? West Earth is so huge, so how did you conquer it? The hearts of the other cult masters also trembled violently as they found it unbelievable. By myself, along with the dragon Qilin and Xianxia, I conquered West Earth. Qin Mu smiled lightly. West Earth has already joined eternal peace, but the distance from it to Middle Earth is 100,000 miles. If the whip can't reach, the emperor can't control it, as they say. West Earth will know its place for a short period of time, but with the roads long and unpaved, as time goes on, West Earth will definitely grow chaotic. So what I want to do is to open traffic between West Earth and Middle Earth. The young patriarch and the past cult masters couldn't believe his words, and they held their foreheads while walking around. Suddenly, a previous cult master stopped and asked solemnly, West Earth and Middle Earth have a great ruins and a flaming desert between them. The closest distance is 10,000 miles. You want to open up a road that's 100,000 miles. Not one, my plan is 2 roads. 2 avenues that have to be incomparably flat for carriages and horses to pass at the greatest speed. The fastest rider should be able to cover those 10,000 miles on a strange beast in a day and night. Wrong! That cult master shouted out sternly. Do you have that much money? Does Eternal Peace Empire have that much money? Paving the roads needs money and divine arts. It takes human lives. Even though my sacred cult has Heavenly Works Hall, but if you have them pave the road, then not only tons of money would be spent, many of our Heavenly Works Hall's disciples would die of exhaustion. Qin Mu shook his head. No. When in West Earth, I've seen the roads there, and they are much more advanced than those of Eternal Peace. The divine arts of True Heaven Palace can be used to pave the road, and I have good relations with the influential families of West Earth, so I can ask True Heaven Palace Master to lead the divine arts practitioners of West Earth to pave the road. They can pave 1,000 miles in a day, so the road of 100,000 miles will only need 100 days. The cost won't be too high. The eyes of the previous cult master lit up, and he smiled. He then took a step back. The other cult masters were still circling around Qin Mu when Xianxia suddenly stopped. What about the flaming desert? It is tens of thousands of miles wide, and it's so dry that there's no water at all. If you open the roads and they get covered by sand, they will be completely useless. When that time comes, the people on the path will grow exhausted and distressed, and will die there. When Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor killed True Heaven Old Mother, the flaming desert went out, and only black tortoise bead is required to draw the water to irrigate the desert. Green dragon bead can be used to grow vegetation and turn the desert into a forest. The plains on the north have snow mountains which could be used for streams. I'll draw it from there and create lakes in the desert, solving the irrigation problem. Xianxia revealed a smile and also backed off. Another cult master then stopped to ask, the closest path is through great ruins. It is peaceful during the day, but when night comes, monsters and the darkness invade. How will you protect the traffic? I cannot ensure it, but I can shift stone statues and gather them to defend against the darkness. There will be a town every 1,000 miles, and a city every 10,000 miles. The cities and the towns will be between the 2 roads for travelers to have a place to rest their feet. With these cities and towns, goods will come to and fro between West Earth, Great Ruins, and Middle Earth. As a result, trade and commerce will definitely prosper. You still haven't explained how you'll solve the issue of money. Once the roads are open and the trade and commerce come and go, the money will naturally pour in. Great Ruins isn't a level road, and there are many strange and bizarre incidents. How can you level the mountains and rivers? Cut into a mountain when meeting a mountain, build a bridge when meeting a river, and pay respect to a god when meeting a god. How wide is the avenue? 108 yards wide. 8 tracks for carriages and 4 tracks for soldiers. The width of the vehicles and horses' tracks in West Earth are different from those in Eternal Peace. How will you ensure smooth traffic on the tracks? In that case, make the tracks similar. The local conditions and customs of West Earth and Eternal Peace are different. What will you do? I'll make them the same then. The writings are different and the divine arts are different. So what will you do? In that case, spread the same writing system, and open up education. Suddenly, the 28 past cult masters laughed in unison, and they bowed toward Qin Mu. Cult master can also be called a saint. You are worthy of the title of the sacred cult master. We tested you on behalf of cult master Li, and you've passed. Qin Mu returned their greeting and said sincerely, "Much thanks to all the cult masters for asking me questions and enlightening me. After returning to the world of the living, I will have the way to carry out the reform. If the reform succeeds to some extent and turns the heavenly moat into thoroughfare, all of you will have the most important merit." Everyone laughed loudly and stood up. The young patriarch was also happy for them. Qin Mu had had a falling out with the past cult masters at first, but now all the grudges were wiped away, and he was glad for it. Suddenly, bird-headed god Qi Xiu's voice reached them. "Cult Master Qin, King Yama wants to punish you personally. Won't you come out?" Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 508 Son of Yudu. King Yama wants to punish you? What have you done? In Hall of Wenyuan, the past cult masters all frowned greatly, and cult master Zhu Yang asked, "Is the thing you did big or small? If it's big, why don't we revolt?" The other cult masters were instantly excited and started to plan on how to revolt and rouse the other dead people in Fengdu. They even thought of a few slogans for the revolt. Qin Mu hurriedly said, "It isn't a big matter. It's just a small matter, so there's no need to revolt. In the battle when we blocked off the gods of high heavens on God-broken mountain range, I seized the primordial spirits of a few people who died in battle from Fengdu and revived them." The past cult masters became silent. After a moment, cult master Hu Jun slapped his thigh and said, "Where were we at? Right, the flags used for the revolt. I feel we should use flags of the martial god." Qin Mu smiled and said, "Just a small matter." Small matter? Seizing people from Fengdu is a small matter. Numerous cult masters turned to look over at him with anger in their eyes and sneered. "Snatching people at the bridge of helplessness scared even us shitless. We thought Yudu had come to attack us. This is definitely not a small matter, and King Yama is going to behead you. If it was a small matter, we would ignore it and let King Yama take you, so he can give you 2 slaps on your buttocks before releasing you. But this is a huge matter which endangered the whole of Fengdu, so revolt is the only way out now," Xianxia said. Outside the hall, God Qi Xiu's voice rang out once more, a little more impatient now. "Cult Master Qin, if you don't come out, I'm going in." The young patriarch suddenly said, "Cult Master Qin, why did King Yama didn't punish you directly and let you roam around the city freely? If your crime is really severe, shouldn't you be guarded tightly in the prison?" When he asked this, everyone came to a sudden realization. Qin Mu didn't look like a prisoner was supposed to look. Instead, he could still visit his friends and family in Fengdu and even give them a beating. "Before King Yama punished you, who else did he see?" Qin Mu nodded. "He dealt with Xing En and Shaman God Kuei. Xing En was released by him, and Shaman God Kuei was to be studied by numerous ghost kings because of his Yudu spells. King Yama also wanted to study the divine arts of Shaman God Kuei, so he let me out first. In that case, the thing you have done is small." The young patriarch smiled. "I know that what Xing En is big, but King Yama still released him. Shaman God Kuei is a god of Yudu, so the things he did should be even worse. Since they were punished first, this means that their crimes were above yours. Your crime is much smaller than theirs. Follow God Qi Xiu. King Yama won't give you trouble." Numerous cult masters nodded and said, "Just go. If King Yama wants to kill you, we'll go seize the execution grounds and the passage to reincarnation." Qin Mu relaxed and walked out of Hall of Wenyuan. God Qi Xiu stood on the head of a stone lion pruning his feathers. When he saw him coming out, he pulled out his beak from his feathers and said, "Follow me." Qin Mu went over while asking, "Senior Qi Xiu, King Yama is summoning me." "Don't talk. You have the smell of a living person," Qi Xiu said. "I hate people that still have breath. If you breathe your last, your words will be much more pleasant. Also, King Yama is not summoning you. He wants to interrogate you." They came to Hall of King Qin, and Qin Mu looked at the front of the hall. There was a pile of flesh fighting and struggling as Xing and still couldn't give up the corporeal body parts of other people. It was evident that he was reluctant to give up his own path. Even a wise man like Xing and finds it hard to give up the benefits he had attained. As a result, he's blinded by greed. He couldn't help shaking his head. By being indecisive, Xing was delaying his life, but it was no surprise. He had been collecting other people's body parts diligently his whole life to take them for his own. Making him give them up now was to make him give up his path and deny his entire life. It was indeed hard to accept it. The greater the achievements and the willpower of a person were, the harder it was for them to change themselves and their understanding. It was hard to admit one's own mistake. The sky is turning bright. Suddenly, mournful shouts came from Fengdu City, and Qin Mu hurriedly took a look at the source of them. He saw huge beasts lying on roofs of the halls and looking up at the sky while shouting, "All homes and all cities be careful. The sky is turning bright." In Fengdu City, the roaming souls filled the sky as they scrambled in all directions. On the land, numerous awe-inspiring gods and devils were running left and right, trying to find places to hide.
Qin Mu was slightly stunned and asked, "God Qi Xiu, what happens when the sky is bright?" God Qi Xiu was unconcerned. "The sun is coming out. They have to hide or else the fire of pure yang from the sky will burn them. This sun is different from the one you see outside." Qin Mu was bewildered. Suddenly, the darkness withdrew rapidly and the foggy Fengdu became incomparably bright. It was his first time seeing the city in the day, and he saw the streets that were bustling with gods and devils suddenly become cold and cheerless. All of the inhabitants had shut their doors, and the roaming souls had delved into the abyss. The huge beasts on the halls had all hid inside, and the entire Fengdu had become quiet instantly. Next, white light became red as an incomparably huge sun blazing with flames rose in the horizon. In an instant, flames came from the east, surging over like the flowing sea that flooded the sky and covered the earth. All the streets were filled, and all the palaces and houses were drowned out. The blazing fire of pure yang swallowed up the cities of Fengdu, the blazing heat almost warping the space. Qin Mu bathed in the fire of pure yang and saw flesh, blood, and meridians gradually appearing on his skeleton body. Looking down, he could even see the 5 viscera and 6 bowels in his ribs. Meanwhile, when he looked into the window of the hall where the gods and devils were hiding, their flesh and blood were gradually fading away, revealing white bones. The true fire of pure yang was harmless to him, but the corporeal bodies of the gods and devils of Fengdu could be burned while their souls and primordial spirits could be incinerated. In the east, the huge sun became hotter and hotter until it was bright red. Incomparably huge palace halls could be faintly seen on the sun, and in front of them were giant drums. Valiant gods and devils were beating the drum frantically, sending the true fire of pure yang from the sun into Fengdu. On the sun, there were 10,000 sacred halls, 10,000 drums, and 10,000 giants that were beating the drums frantically. True fire was spewed out and flooded Fengdu. This is... Qin Mu's mind trembled. He suddenly heard a shriek and turned back to look. He saw the big ball of flesh that was Xing being burned by the true fire of pure yang. Dozens of faces distorted as they struggled and shrieked in pain. The many bodies were fading away after being burned by the true fire, revealing Xing's true body. Xing was also in unbearable pain. At that moment, he suddenly jumped up and splashed into the river of helplessness. The fog in the river under the bridge churned as monsters moved to swallow him. Xing? Qin Mu quickly came to the side of the river. The fog became thicker to defend against the flames of the sun, so he couldn't see any traces of Xing. He fell into Yudu. God Qi Xiu flapped his wings. The true fire of pure yang was ineffective against him, but he still hurried them. Faster, King Yama is still waiting for you. Qin Mu composed himself and followed him into Hall of King Qin. Inside it, King Yama was still clad in a black cape. His face and body were hidden in the darkness. Qin Mu looked around but didn't see any of the ghost kings. Qi Xiu, you may go now. King Yama sat on the throne in Hall of King Qin, so his voice came from high above. Understood. God Xiao left Hall of King Qin. On the throne, King Yama flipped through a book which rustled. Only he and Qin Mu were left in, and he seemed to be perfectly fine from the rising sun. Qin Mu was anxious, but could do nothing. After a while, King Yama stood up, and the light in Hall of King Qin became dim. Qin Mu instantly felt as though he was shrouded in darkness. "Are you from Carefree Village? Who is your father?" Qin Mu was slightly stunned, not understanding why he suddenly asked that. "My father is Qin Hanjin, my ancestral hometown should be Carefree Village, but I wasn't born there." "Qin Hanjin?" King Yama stared blankly at him as he said in a low voice, "Has it come to the generation of Han? Yu, De, Chang, Ming, Han, Feng, Huan, Zhen. The Qin of your generation should already be more than 100th generation." He picked up the book he was reading and searched for the Han word. "Han is the 106th generation, Feng is the 107th generation. Your original name isn't Qin Mu, since there should be a Feng word in your name." Qin Mu nodded, but he didn't say his original name. After meeting Grandmaster, he realized how dangerous it was to say his real name. With a person like King Yama who controlled Fengdu, it was even more dangerous. Even though there was Hall of King Qin and King Yama had the family history of Qin, Qin Mu still had to be careful.
It's right that you didn't tell me your name. The world is indeed abnormally dangerous, said King Yama. My surname is also Qin, but it was given to me. I'm adopted. I was originally nothing at all, an orphan that was alone and had nobody to rely on. His Majesty allowed me to enter the family register of Qin family, so my name is on it. Qin Mu understood. He said he wasn't originally from the Qin family, but he was conferred the surname Qin and taken in as an adopted child. It's been a long time since I saw a visitor from Carefree Village. King Yama walked to him at the front of the hall. Looking at the Fengdu being bathed in flames, he said, I had originally thought His Majesty would come back to this place from Carefree Village, but I never expected that even after waiting for 20,000 years for him, I would still not have seen him. Only his 107th descendant has come. When you used that Yudu divine art to seize a few souls from me, I noticed that your appearance looks similar to that of His Majesty, which was why I didn't stop you. Qin Mu still had some doubts and probed. What you mean is founding emperor is still alive? King Yama's face was shrouded in the black robe, and even the most intense flames couldn't penetrate into the darkness under it. His Majesty is still alive. After Carefree Village was opened, he led the last gods out of this world, preserving his strength for a counterattack. His Majesty is powerful and wise, so he knew that danger was approaching long before it came. So he had ordered me to open up Fengdu, making a place for the gods that couldn't leave in time to hide until the day we will rise again. This wait has lasted for 20,000 years. You said you weren't born in Carefree Village earlier, so where were you born? Qin Mu was silent for a moment before saying astringently, Yudu, Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 509 Great Terror. Even King Yama couldn't help being astonished. He suddenly turned to look at Qin Mu, and the black cape fluttered up with a wave motion as though it was being blown by the wind. Yudu? You weren't born in Carefree Village, but in Yudu. Qin Mu still couldn't see the face under the black robe and just nodded. My parents were headed to great ruins from Carefree Village, but they were ambushed on their way. The casualties were high, and the lucky survivors escaped into Yudu. I was then born there. He had discovered his birth in Ghost Valley, and from the time trace in that ship, his mother Ha still been holding him in her womb. The precious ship suffered the attacks of gods and devils, getting struck down to the bottom of Ghost Valley, embedding itself between the seal of the two worlds. To avoid the extraterritorial devils, his mother led the people of the ship to seek refuge in Yudu. Qin Mu should have been born in Yudu, but he didn't know how he was brought to great ruins after he was born and floated down surging river to disabled elderly village. Granny C had heard the cries of an infant and picked him up to bring to the village. He was born in Yudu, and there was no doubt about that. You were born in Yudu. The tone of King Yama held some disappointment. I thought it would be an old swallow returning to lead us into battle, finishing what wasn't done. Never did I expect to see a new swallow. It would have been as well, but in the end, it wasn't a new swallow either, just one chick. Hehe. Founding Emperor. You are really carefree in Carefree Village, having already forgotten that you still have people waiting for you in this world to make a comeback. His tone was slightly angry. Carefree Village is not a tender village nor an unmoved village. It's a place for you to make a comeback and not a place for you to sink into oblivion. In Great Ruins, there are still countless gods and devils that are waiting silently for you to return. They are waiting for you to raise your flag and fight. His cape was still fluttering. Only when his heart was roused or when his fighting spirit was overflowing would his cape tremble violently. Suddenly, his aura weakened, and he became slightly dispirited. I don't believe an emperor who had founded an era would be willing to accept defeat and become silent. Yet, I have already waited for 20,000 years, and the stone statues in Great Ruins and the ghosts in Fengdu have also waited 20,000 years. Why have you not returned? Qin Mu looked at him quietly, not knowing what to say. King Yama had been anticipating a guest from Carefree Village and hoping for the news of founding emperor for 20,000 years. Yet what he found was only Qin Mu, a person that was born in Yudu although he had the bloodline of founding emperor. Qin Mu wasn't the person he was waiting for. Even if it was Qin Hanjin, at least he could encourage him and bring news of Carefree Village. Yet Qin Mu, who was born in Yudu, was completely clueless about Carefree Village. The identity of founding emperor's descendant couldn't soothe the heart of loyal soldiers that had waited for 20,000 years. After a long time, King Yama's breath returned to normal. The eyes under the black robe shifted to Qin Mu as he said, "You were born in Yudu, and it is the same Fengdu. They are both the worlds of the dead. I have never heard of humans being born in the world of the dead. Let me see if there's anything wrong with you." Qin Mu stared blankly as he didn't understand him. Suddenly, King Yama started walking around him and speaking in a solemn voice. "There are few people in Yudu, but monsters can be born in Yudu. They are a combination of spirits and Yudu's devil nature. You have seen the monsters under Bridge of Helplessness which are from Yudu. You being born in Yudu is different from how those monsters were born from the grievances of heaven and earth and the devil nature. You were born from the womb, but you might be contaminated by the devil nature of Yudu." Contaminated by the devil nature of Yudu? Qin Mu probed. "What you mean is?" He was slightly shocked. A devil god had once said that he was a devil just like him. Had it been not lying and he actually had devil nature on him? And he had it since the moment he was born? King Yama didn't continue speaking. Instead, he lifted the hood of the black robe and revealed his face beneath it. Before Qin Mu could see it, the two eyes were like swirling whirlpools which sucked his mind inside. "Don't be scared. I'm just exploring your soul to see if it's different from humans who are born in the normal world." Qin Mu felt his world spinning as though he was situated in the center of two eyes. They were scarlet like blood and strangely large. The pupils looked at him from the left and right while he was spinning continuously, unable to fall to the bottom. He seemed to just go down into boundless darkness with a never-ending sinking sensation. When King Yama spoke, his words seemed to be extremely far from him, even further than the 9 heavens above. "There has been no human that was ever been born in Yudu before, and I don't know what happens when a human is born in Yudu. However, I can guess that when you were born, something extremely terrifying happened. The devil nature and souls roaming around in Yudu would have tried to enter your body. Your mother should have been able to defend against the roaming souls in Yudu, but she might not have been able to keep the devil nature away. I want to see what Yudu has done to you." Qin Mu tried his best to stabilize his mind, and the jade pendant on his neck suddenly floated up. The light hummed as it burst outward as though it was defending him against King Yama's blood eyes. The 2 blood eyes grew bigger, and the light of the jade pendant got brighter. In the end, though, the 2 blood eyes of King Yama suppressed the light of the jade pendant. Qin Mu wanted to struggle, but he couldn't muster any strength at all. He could only let that 2 nightmare-like blood eyes to continue prying and suppressing him. He felt that his corporal body didn't have any strength, as though it had been detached from his soul. It felt as though he was drowning and couldn't breathe anymore. His soul was slowly floating out of his corporeal body. At that moment, Qin Mu suddenly stopped spinning and whispers came from his surroundings. It was like countless devils hidden in the boundless darkness were talking in low voices. Those whispers gradually came closer, growing louder and louder, noisier and noisier. They finally became countless voices that bombarded him with different words in different languages, splitting his head with the pain. They were so noisy that his thoughts and consciousness were becoming scattered and messy. Finally, all of the voices overlapped together and became a single one. It was Yudu's devil language. "Shut up!" Qin Mu shouted out angrily, but what came out from his mouth wasn't the language of humans. It was Yudu's devil language. Suddenly, terrifying energy burst out from his body, and it could suddenly move. He was still located between the two blood eyes, standing there solitarily. Behind him was boundless darkness, but a seam split apart in the there. It opened up, and whispers began again. The seam grew bigger and bigger until light flowed out. With a hum, a huge eyeball appeared behind him and rotated left and right. That eye presented a strange pupil, and that was 3 pupils squeezed together. They were also rotating while changing their directions. Devil light emanated from the eye as though there were black butterfly wings growing from its sides. It was pretty and flirtatious yet extremely strange. "Shut up!" Qin Mu hugged his head while shouting angrily. "Stop being noisy!" Whoosh! The space in the surroundings trembled violently like cracking glass. King Yama was shocked by the power in that roar and could only stare blankly at the bewitching eye behind him. He muttered, "You were born in Yudu and are indeed affected by Yudu's devil nature. It is in your body, but it was being suppressed by the jade pendant. Now that I've suppressed the jade pendant, I've released your devil nature. Stop being noisy." The Yudu's devil language from Qin Mu's mouth flowed smoothly like never before, and when his voice rang out, the space in the surroundings instantly shattered. The time and space created by the blood eyes of King Yama crumbled. Behind him, another seam appeared as another eye was about to open. King Yama felt his hair stand on ends. It was as if he was standing in front of a huge, terrifying beast that was about to wake up. "What fierce devil nature! I can't let you out." He made his move brazenly, and the 2 blood eyes withdrew rapidly. His cape fluttered and covered the heaven and earth, shrouding the entire hall of King Qin. He mobilized all his strength to suppress the devil nature in Qin Mu's body. A voice full of the devil nature came from Hall of King Qin in fluent Yudu. "Merely a small ghost and you dare to suppress me?" Boom! Hall of King Qin trembled violently as another rumble rang out. Hall of King Qin trembled a few more times, and the pillars inside fell left and right. The roof of the hall suddenly split, and the hall shuddered as though it could collapse any time. Soon though, the hall regained its peace. Qin Mu opened his eyes and looked around in a daze. In front of him, a few huge pillars had broken as though sliced into pieces by sharp claws. There were a few more that were bent from being smashed. There was true fire of pure yang leaking in through the cracks within Hall of King Qin, burning the wood with tongues of flame. It looked as if there had been a huge battle as creaks came from the roof. Lumps of dust and bricks fell from time to time. What happened? Qin Mu was at a loss. "Don't you know what had happened?" King Yama's voice came from the darkness. Qin Mu immediately looked over and saw King Yama embedded in the center of a bent pillar. It seemed as though he'd been smashed against it by a terrifying power. Qin Mu was dumbstruck and immediately went forward, wanting to help him. But King Yama waved his hand and struggled out of the pillar himself. "Do you really not know what happened?" Qin Mu shook his head. He was completely clueless. He only remembered King Yama's eyes looking at him as he continued to sink between them. "It's also good that you don't know. Keep the jade pendant of Carefree Village with you all the time. You cannot lose it. No matter what, you can't lose it." King Yama let out a shaky breath and said calmly, "This jade pendant is of utmost importance to you. If you lose it, terrifying things will happen." Qin Mu pushed his jade pendant back under his clothes and asked, "Can I show the jade pendant to others?" King Yama trembled violently, and he said sternly, "It's best not to." Qin Mu smiled then. I have taken the jade pendant off to show others numerous times before. King Yama let out another shaky breath. That is their luck, and they should celebrate still being alive. You can go now. Qi Xiu, send him out. God Qi Xiu popped his head in and looked around curiously. When he saw the miserable situation of Hall of King Qin, he shrunk his neck back and said, Cult Master Qin, follow me. Qin Mu had doubts. He hurriedly walked out of Hall of King Qin and asked God Qi Xiu in a low voice, What happened just now? I have no idea. Qi Xiu shook his head and said, Seems like some terrifying existence attacked Hall of King Qin. Don't speak. You have the smell of a human. Also, King Yama's voice came from behind. You can walk into the darkness of great ruins and it won't injure you at all. If there's a chance, you should take a trip to Yudu. Qin Mu was slightly stunned. He turned back to cry out, I can enter the darkness of great ruins? Before King Yama could reply, a loud rumble suddenly came from behind them, and Hall of King Qin crumbled straight on the ruler of Fengdu. Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 510 Mad About Money. Qin Mu was astonished. He turned to look at Qi Xiu, but the god buried his head in his feathers, pretending to see nothing. For Qi Xiu to be the trusted aide of King Yama, his reputation wasn't undeserved. He was firm in not looking at King Yama's sorry form, which was the wise method of protecting oneself. If it were other people, they would have rushed into the debris to save King Yama. Qin Mu sighed ruefully in his heart. Saving King Yama would show that one was loyal, but the person would also see the sorry state of King Yama, causing damage to his wise and strong image. There were merit and demerit to it, but since one wouldn't know if the merit or demerit would be bigger, the best was to pretend one didn't see anything. Besides, the collapse of the hall wouldn't hurt King Yama, so it was better to not show one's loyalty by rushing over to him. King Yama said that I can walk through the darkness of great ruins and not get hurt. Is this true or not? Qin Mu was slightly hesitant because going into the darkness concerned his life. If it wasn't true, he would die if he went out, so he didn't dare to try. Ever since he was young, he had been taught by the villagers of disabled elderly village about how there were great terrors in the darkness and he was not to go in no matter what. On top of that, during Qin Mu's growth, he had also seen the horror of the darkness, so he had never even considered the possibility that the darkness might not touch him. He had entered the darkness numerous times, but he had always relied on treasures or strong practitioners that were like gods to protect himself from being closed in on by the darkness. He'd used Xing and's chest, village chief's protection, or dragon-rearing sovereign's protection to remain unharmed. He was somewhat afraid of attempting to enter the darkness without any protection. Let's go, Qi Xiu hurried him. After sending you off, I can rest. God Qi Xiu, I still have to go to where Heavenly Saint Cult and the human emperors are to fetch the dragon Qilin and the chest. Qi Xiu could only bring him to where the past cult masters of Heavenly Devil Cult stayed. All the doors were locked tight, and the dragon Qilin was shut outside by the young patriarch. He was currently wagging his tail and saying sweet things to get patriarch to open the door. The young patriarch didn't acknowledge him no matter what, only shouting from inside, In the journey of life and death, I'm already dead while you are still alive, so we can't be together. Follow Cult Master out. The dragon Qilin clawed at the door and cried loudly. The young patriarch was also choking as he held back his tears. He wanted to open the door, but he was afraid that the fellow would come in and rub against him again, so he steeled his heart. Qin Mu called the dragon Qilin over and said with a smile, Fatty dragon, no need to be sad. Patriarch is living fine here and we are living perfectly fine outside. We can always come to see him anytime in the future. The dragon Qilin walked over. When he was touched by the true fire of pure yang, flesh slowly grew on his body. The incomparably huge sun had risen very high by then and become so large that it looked like it could fall out of the sky at any moment. Qin Mu raised his head and saw that the sacred halls on the sun were made of gold. The gods and devils in front of them could be faintly seen still beating the drums frantically. They were using the true fire of pure yang to refine Fengdu. The sun was so close to them that Qin Mu began suspecting that the gods and devils on the sun would attack at any moment. They don't dare to attack. God Qi Xiu pruned his feathers calmly, unruffled in the mid of the chaos. This is Fengdu, which is part of Yudu. They look close, but they are actually very far away. There's a world barrier between us. On top of that, we have fought a few times in the past, and they were the ones on the losing end. They only dare to hide in the sun and beat their drums. Qin Mu was puzzled about it, so he asked, "The sun in the sky is different from the one in eternal peace, so this sun is the sun of great ruins." "It's real," God Qi Xiu said. "The sun of eternal peace is fake." Qin Mu was speechless. The sun before him was too terrifying. Luckily, they were living in the facade of the sun, moon, and stars. Otherwise, if the people of eternal peace saw such a terrifying sun, even the emperor might go crazy. "Patriarch, do you have money?" Qin Mu asked through a slit in the door. "Entering Fengdu requires Fengdu gold coins, and I only had 3 to get here. I need coins to take the boat." The young patriarch stuffed a few gold coins out through the slit. "I just died, so I don't have much money. Be thrifty."
Qin Mu acknowledged it and went to knock on the other cult masters' doors. "Fellow cult masters, if you don't pay up, I'll stop your offerings and dismantle your memorial tablets. You scum, who bullies their ancestors? Isn't it just money? Take it." Qin Mu knocked on every door and extorted about 200 Fengdu gold coins. He then went to the residences of the human emperors and asked the strange beasts in front of Sacred Hall of 5 Yang, "Is first ancestor back?" The 2 strange beasts ran into the hall and threw the Taotai out. "Old master still hasn't returned." The Taotai landed on the ground and got burned by the true fire of pure Yang. With a few bangs, it turned back into a huge chest that followed obediently behind the dragon Qilin. "Cult Master Qin, it's time to leave." Qi Xiu hurried him. "God Qi Xiu, please wait a moment." Qin Mu went to second ancestor's home, who opened the door but didn't walk out as he was worried about being burned by the true fire of pure Yang. "Both of my sleeves are flowing in the breeze, and I really don't have money, so I can only go to teacher's house to freeload." Qin Mu took out a few Fengdu gold coins and smiled. "I know you have noble character and unquestionable integrity, so I'm here to give you a few gold coins to tide through this period of time. When I go back to Hall of Human Emperors, I'll burn some money for all the ancestors." Second ancestor was delighted and hurriedly took the gold coins. "You are much more filial than Little Su." "Little Su isn't back yet, but when he returns, we are planning to give him a huge surprise." Second ancestor, "Don't forget to tell village chief I came by." "Don't worry, I'll definitely tell him." Second ancestor promised through gritted teeth. Qin Mu hesitated before saying, "Second ancestor, can you lend me first ancestors between life and death? I would like to do business." Second ancestor was puzzled. "How would you use between life and death for business?" Qin Mu smiled. "There are many gods and devils in Fengdu who can't go to the world of the living, so I would like to use between life and death as a bridge for the divine arts practitioners to make deals through it. Divine arts practitioners can take their gold coins or learn their divine arts, paths, and techniques in payment for helping those already passed on fulfill their wishes. I think this could be a big business. I plan to pave a road through great ruins, so I require some money to subsidize the expenses." Second ancestor was still puzzled and asked, "Where will the money come from?" "The divine arts practitioners will have to pay an entrance fee to use between life and death, and I will earn a huge amount from it." Second ancestor came to a realization and scolded him with a smile, "You wily brat." Qin Mu smiled and said, "Between life and death can connect Fengdu to the world of the living, so second ancestor can collect money here too, taking entrance fee from the gods and devils. Like that, you can also earn a huge amount. Even if I don't give offerings, you guys could live comfortably. In just a few years' time, all the ancestors would become the richest tycoons in Fengdu." Second ancestor was dumbfounded and cried out, "Collecting money from both sides? Such a good deal? Won't people be jabbing our spine and scolding us? Between life and death is in our hands, and there's only this road that can connect the world of the dead and the world of the living. Even if they scold, they will still have no choice but to take our road and pay us." Second ancestor hurriedly rushed out, braving the true fire of pure Yang, to get to First Ancestor's sacred hall of 5 yang. He cared not for the blazing fire all over him as he dashed into the hall to fetch between life and death. The lips of the 2 huge beasts guarding the door twitched, and they said, "Second master, old master only had this much of property left. You will bleed him dry sooner or later." Second Ancestor smiled at them. "My master still regards me as an outsider? When I'm rich, you guys will benefit as well." Qin Mu took between life and death, which was a small river that was about 3 yards long. There was a boat and a bridge within it. Second Ancestor then instructed him, "Refine this between life and death first. When you perform the rites, I will be able to sense it over here. Remember, perform the rites at night. If you perform it in the day, you'd see the same sight as right now. The gods on the sun would burn us and we wouldn't be able to do any business." Qin Mu acknowledged it and hung the long river on his body. Second Ancestor, wait for my news. Second Ancestor woke up at that moment and said immediately, "Business is a small matter. Don't spend too much effort on this and focus on your cultivation. Leave collecting money to others."
Qin Mu nodded and said, "I understand." After saying so, he took out some more Fengdu gold coins. "Second Ancestor, please hand these over to the other ancestors for them to tide over these few days. Human Emperor Qin is considerate." Qin Mu bade farewell, and God Qi Xiu sent him to the boundary stone of the living realm of the dead. After going past here, there will be no more true fire of pure yang. Just take the boat back. Qin Mu gave his thanks. After walking out of the living realm of the dead, his corporeal body returned to normal. He waved to God Qi Xiu, who spread his wings to fly away. The dock was nearby, and Qin Mu called the lone boat in the sea of fog. The skeleton Taoist Ling Jing steered the boat over, carrying him, the dragon Qilin, and the chest to the opposite shore. When they came there, Qin Mu disembarked from the boat and took out 3 gold coins to pay the fare. Taoist Ling Jing was astonished and immediately said, "They are not humans, so there's no need to pay." Qin Mu smiled and said, "Taoist, just take them." Taoist Ling Jing hurriedly accepted his payment before probing him. Human Emperor Qin struck a windfall? Qin Mu laughed loudly. "I'm going to get rich. Taoist, farewell." Taoist Ling Jing saw him off and put away the gold coins properly while thinking to himself, "Another few hundred years, and I will be able to buy a house in Fengdu too." God Qi Xiu returned to Hall of King Qin and saw that the collapsed building had already returned back to normal. God Qi Xiu carefully walked over and saw King Yama standing at the back of the hall, looking at the flames behind the door. "Visitor from Carefree Village, very interesting," King Yama suddenly said. Even though he wasn't born in Carefree Village, his lineage is still that of founding emperor. He's extraordinary. From just this short meetup, I actually have great expectations for him. If it was his father that had come, my expectations may be big, but I would still have become dispirited afterward. Yet now, even though I was disappointed when he arrived at first, my anticipation is only going to grow and grow. God Qi Xiu didn't understand. This cult master Qin, human emperor Qin, has a temper that jumps all over the place. So why is King Yama holding expectations for him? He stayed half a day in Fengdu and beat up all the past human emperors, smashed the palace of cult master Zuyang, and beat up the past heavenly devil cult masters. He even went to extort money from the past cult masters and asked for between life and death, planning to connect the world of the dead and the world of the living to do some business. Isn't this fooling around? King Yama turned around and said with a smile, "Fengdu is too cold and cheerless, so let him play crazy and some unexpected changes might happen. I have never seen such an interesting person with such ideas. Maybe he can achieve what others couldn't. Besides, the secrets about him aren't as simple as he thinks. This makes me look forward to him even more." God Qi Xiu was astonished. King Yama will really allow him to connect Fengdu to the world of the living for him to do his business? King Yama waved his hands and didn't speak anymore. Even though the sun had risen, darkness covered Yudu. There was no sky, no land, no sun, moon, or stars. Xing'an floated in the darkness, but at that moment, a faint voice rang out, waking him up. "Xing'an, wake up!